Chapter 2658. Sacred Palace Keeper at the top of a grandiose and lavish black penthouse in Sacred Palace. A slender, tall, and blond middle-aged man sat next to a desk, reading a jade slip casually. A silver-haired old man in a white robe entered hastily. "Palace Keeper, we just received news that someone is coming our way through Sacred Heaven Road," said the old man. "Oh, the Sacred Palace is accepting a new genius disciple. That's great," the blond, middle-aged man answered casually, but his eyes were still on the jade slip. "The thing is, the time he spent reaching the summit from Sacred Heaven Road was too short," said the white-robed old man anxiously. "Too short? How short?" The blond, middle-aged man finally put down the jade slip and looked downward. The white-robed old man took a deep breath and slowly showed one finger. "A year." The blond man nodded slightly. "If he can reach the peak in a year, that's pretty good." "Not 1 year." The old man shook his head. "A month, then?" The blond man's face began to turn serious. "Sacred Palace has countless geniuses, but those who can reach the summit in a month could be counted with one hand. Geniuses like this are worth our total support and nurture." "No, sir, not a month either, but," before the old man finished, "don't tell me he only spent a day." The blond, middle-aged man stood up suddenly. His eyes were shining. "No, not a day, but 1 hour. That man spent less than an hour on the Sacred Heaven Road to reach the peak." The white-robed old man finally finished his sentence. "How's that possible?" Even the blond, middle-aged man, a top expert among the high-level grand ultimate gods, and also the respectable Sacred Palace Keeper, was shocked when he heard such news. Reaching the summit through Sacred Heaven Road within an hour? One had to understand that the Crimson Stone Saint had sacrificed a lot of effort when he was still alive to build the Sacred Heaven Road as a means to pick disciples for Sacred Palace. There were incredibly difficult challenges along Sacred Heaven Road, such that those who could get through within a year were considered very skillful geniuses. If a month, a top genius, one who spent 1 day, was simply a super freak. There was not anyone who could reach the summit through Sacred Heaven Road in a mere day since the Sacred Palace's establishment a long time ago. Spending less than 1 hour, that was unimaginable. "Where's he now?" The blond, middle-aged man seemed to be very excited. "He has reached the summit and is now at Sacred Palace's plaza," said the white-haired old man, wearing white robes. "Let's go. Bring me to him," said the blond man immediately. Crazy. A super freak who only spent less than 1 hour to reach the summit. Such a super freak was, of course, worth a personal greeting by the Sacred Palace Keeper. Jian Wushuang stood there with his arms folded on the gigantic plaza at the Sacred Palace. Numerous Sacred Palace disciples were surrounding him along with some Sacred Palace experts. All of them were staring at Jian Wushuang while quietly discussing among themselves. "It's him. I was beside the Sacred Heaven Road just now and saw him stepping on the first step of Sacred Heaven Road to head upwards. He had reached the top of Sacred Heaven Road and came into the Sacred Palace in less than an hour." "Not even an hour? You've got to be joking. How come he can move so quickly?" Sacred Heaven Road is very difficult, especially the consciousness space challenge. He probably used incredible force to defeat them instead of finding a way to pass through his 10 opponents. However, according to my knowledge of the last consciousness space 1,000-step challenge, his opponents were all super strong peak Earth ultimate gods. He managed to defeat them. Although he's only a high-level Earth ultimate god, his battle strength is unheard of. Monster. A monster has visited the Sacred Palace. The disciples had a fascinated look on their faces. It was normal as Jian Wushuang had displayed extremely heaven-defying abilities. However, they did not realize the abilities Jian Wushuang showed along Sacred Heaven Road was not even the tip of the iceberg. It was indeed true. He was just a high-level Earth ultimate god, but his true battle strength was extremely strong even among high-level heaven ultimate gods. The Sacred Palace disciples would perhaps be frightened to death if he unleashed his full battle strength. Jian Wushuang, of course, did not quite like to show off, and would not have been acting so high-profile were it not because he wanted to attract the Sacred Palace Keeper's attention. He would have normally used the black stone to conceal his aura to disguise as having a primary-level Heaven Ultimate God's Divine Power aura, so that the public would be more acceptable in the event he displayed powers slightly stronger than his supposed realm's battle strength. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two figures glided speedily over and landed on the plaza in the blink of an eye before Jian Wushuang. Finally here, Jian Wushuang focused his eyesight and looked over at the blond, middle-aged man between the two. He could sense the pressure brought to him by the blond, middle-aged man. A pressure Heaven Ultimate God could not possibly bring forth. Only experts at the Grand Ultimate God level could bring him such heavy pressure. It was clear who he was. Is he the Sacred Palace Keeper? Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The blond man was staring at him too as he looked at him. A powerful soul power shrouded Jian Wushuang's entire body, and he naturally also noticed Jian Wushuang's facial disguise. He changed his face. The blond, middle-aged man could see through it all, but he did not show it on his face. Kid, welcome to the Sacred Palace. Si Zhen, the Sacred Palace Keeper. My pleasure to meet you, Palace Keeper Si Zhen. Jian Wushuang bowed, slightly, but did not reveal his name. Follow me. The blond, middle-aged man looked deeply at Jian Wushuang and did not ask any questions in front of the Sacred Palace disciples. He instead brought Jian Wushuang into the grand penthouse. At the top of the penthouse, the blond, middle-aged man sent away the white-robed, white-haired man before setting up a restrictive shield around them before he finally asked, Kid, tell me who exactly are you? Chapter 2659. In Suer Jian Wushuang smiled plainly and slowly bowed upon seeing the blond, middle-aged palace keeper Si Zhen sitting down. Jian Yi, a pleasure to meet you, Palace Keeper Si Zhen. Palace Keeper Si Zhen suddenly stood up in surprise. Jian Yi, you're the Northern Dark Star, Territorial Lord? Jian Wushuang did not answer, but his facial muscles began to twitch before reverting to his true form after a short moment. Si Zhen had seen Jian Wushuang's portrait before as one of Crimson Stone Fort's highest authorities and naturally recognized his face right away. It's really you? Palace Keeper Si Zhen was rather shocked, but soon shook his head. It can't be. The Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord should be a peak Earth ultimate god, according to our intelligence, but your cultivation level, the cultivation level those people previously sensed was due to my divine power aura being masked with a special method. My true level is only at the high-level Earth ultimate god. Jian Wushuang smiled. However, I've heard you concurrently withstood 3 heaven ultimate gods by yourself and wasn't even at a disadvantage. In other words, you already have the battle strength no less than that of a heaven ultimate god as a high-level Earth ultimate god. Si Zhen slightly squinted. That's indeed true, admitted Jian Wushuang directly. However, the fact remains that he was merely a primary-level Earth ultimate god when he withstood 3 primary-level Heaven ultimate gods by himself and had only made a breakthrough to high-level Earth ultimate god after obtaining some divine elixir pills later, which was what Palace Keeper Si Zhen was witnessing. Jian Wushuang would not take initiative to mention that, of course. No wonder you have only spent less than an hour in the Sacred Heaven Road to reach the summit. The Sacred Heaven Road challenges are set in accordance with one's cultivation level. The challenges you experience should be set at that level as well, since you're only a high-level Earth ultimate god. Your opponents in the thousand-step consciousness space were only peak Earth ultimate gods with stronger abilities, so there's no way they could compete against you. Xijun gazed solemnly at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled plainly. Palace Keeper Xijun, you overly flattered me. You know my current situation well with both the Life and Death Tower, Divine Demon Sect, and many others enthusiastically looking for me to obtain the interspatial ring on me. I've been concealing my true identity all these years while traveling to Danyang continent from northern Darkstar territory, just because I want to pass the interspatial ring to the Crimson Stone Fort Master. However, perhaps it's not so easy for someone of my status to meet the Fort Master. Hence, I can only come to Sacred Palace and make a fuss to lure you into personally meeting me. I can understand your intentions and shall transmit a message to the Fort Master. Palace Keeper Xijun nodded slightly and immediately took out a message token. An answer was received about a minute later. The Fort Master is currently discussing something with Grand Elder Yunshan and said shall come to meet you immediately right after the discussion, said Palace Keeper Xijun. I shall wait here for a little while in that case. Jian Wushuang smiled patiently. The wait took almost half a day, and finally, ring. A figure slowly appeared before Jian Wushuang after a light beam flashed. It was an extremely beautiful, slender, and tall woman with a rosy cheek clad in an ice blue long dress. She even possessed a majestic air, perhaps due to her high status. Although she did not purposely let out a strong divine power aura, one would not dare think of committing any blasphemy acts toward her as she stood there. Is she Crimson Stone Saint's daughter, Yin Sewer? Jian Wushuang calmly looked at the beautiful lady. You are Jian Yin Sewer also looked toward Jian Wushuang. A pleasure to meet you. Jian Wushuang modestly bowed as a sense of respect toward an expert. Is the interspatial ring still with you right now? Yin Sewer's voice was incredibly cold. Jian Wushuang turned his hand to show the interspatial ring that Scorpion King had tossed at him before dying. There was not even a missing blood gems, as he had never touched it at all ever since he carefully guarded the interspatial ring. He simply passed the interspatial ring into Yin Sewer's hand in its complete and original form. Yin Sewer quickly scanned through the interspatial ring when she took it and nodded. 3,700,000,000 pounds of blood gems is truly a great wealth. It's unfortunately I've lost one of my right-hand men, Scorpion King, due to these blood gems. It's only a matter of time before I find Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect to seek vengeance after cleaning up those factions in the Crimson Stone Fort. Jian Wushuang's expression remained the same upon hearing that despite agreeing with her in his mind, Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect had the guts to make their move on Scorpion King under so many people's watchful eyes because they were not afraid of Yin Sewer seeking revenge. Yin Sewer indeed currently did not possess the capabilities to get back at them by merely relying on the powers she could maneuver, which was not comparable with either Divine Demon Sect or Life and Death Tower at that point. However, it was not something that could be easily achieved unless she could unite all the power within Crimson Stone Fort. Yin Sewer gazed at Jian Wushuang again. Scorpion King communicated with me earlier and mentioned you before. He said you possess a token from my father. Indeed. Jian Wushuang took out the token that Crimson Stone Saint gave him. Yin Sewer, who was extremely familiar with Crimson Stone Saint and Palace Keeper Xijun, immediately recognized it as soon as the token was shown. It's real. Yin Sewer and Xijun looked at each other with a strange light shining in their eyes. Yin Sewer continued, Scorpion King told me before that you aren't a personal disciple of my father, so this token, the token is indeed given to me by Crimson Stone Saint. You can personally go to Saint's tomb and ask, as it's because of a deal I made with him, said Jian Wushuang. What kind of a deal? Insur asked. It's a very simple deal. I promise him to help you resolve your current crisis once I possess sufficient abilities before helping you to make a breakthrough into the undying saint realm if possible in return for the Fontian scroll, said Jian Wushuang. Fontian scroll? My father had given his Fontian scroll to you? Insur was shocked. She knew the Fontian scroll's origin. It was an extremely rare treasure. After Crimson Stone, Saint died. Many experts knew that he had left behind a residential tomb with the Fontian scroll located there. Therefore, those experts were attracted by it and wanted to enter his tomb and explore. Unfortunately, Crimson Stone Saint had set up multiple layers of restrictive shields to the extent that one would not be able to enter by force unless they had the capabilities of an undying saint. Fontian scroll had thus been left inside his tomb. Chapter 2660, Sacred Palace, Disciple Her. Father gave such a precious treasure to Jian Yi, who was standing before her. Moreover, Jian Yi was not his personal disciple, and they merely made a deal. Is Father so trusting towards him and thinking he can really help me? Insur thought to herself before saying, Father must have his reasons for willing making a deal with you using the Fontian scroll. And have you helped me, but your current abilities are still rather weak. Jian Wushuang was at a loss for words. It was undeniable that his current abilities would not be looked upon highly by Insur or any grand ultimate gods. How about this? Why don't you stay here in the Sacred Palace, since you've taken the Sacred Heaven Road and reached the summit? There are a lot of cultivation resources here for you to increase your abilities. I'll ask Palace Keeper Sijun to grant you the convenience of obtaining whatever you need and ask for, said Insur. There actually are items that I need, said Jian Wushuang. Tell me. Insur was rather calm. I need divine elixir pills, said Jian Wushuang directly. How many? Insur asked. As many as possible. A few thousand would be best, said Jian Wushuang. A few thousand? Insur was shocked. Jian Yi, a few thousand divine elixir pills? You really have quite an appetite. Palace Keeper Sijun also opened his eyes widely and stared at Jian Wushuang. Oh, is it difficult? Jian Wushuang asked. Not that it's difficult, but simply impossible, said Sijun. It's indeed impossible. Insur nodded as well. Divine elixir pills aren't as common as primordial stones, although Crimson Stone Fort is quite wealthy, and that we do keep quite a bit of divine elixir pills. Most of them have their specific function, with not many that we can actually use. Furthermore, the most important point was that Yunshan guarded most of those pills which could be used. You know him? Yes, the leader of another faction in Crimson Stone Fort, the Grand Elder of Crimson Stone Fort, said Jian Wushuang. Exactly. Even though I'm the Crimson Stone Fort Master, there are quite many resources that I need to go through him if I want to take them. The divine elixir pills are an example. I might not be able to ask for too many even if I personally requested the pills. I can't guarantee how many I can obtain, but I'll do my best to request for you, said Insur. I shall thank you in advance, said Jian Wushuang gratefully. He knew it would be difficult for Insur's, but it was already very kind of her to agree with helping him as much as she could. It was also because Crimson Stone Saint had personally sent him. Otherwise, he would never receive such special treatment from Insur. Was it someone else? Jian Yi, this is your Sacred Palace disciple's token. Please stay in the Sacred Palace for the coming days. I shall inform everyone that all the resources in Sacred Palace are unconditionally open for your use. Palace Keeper Sijun passed Jian Wushuang a token. Jian Wushuang accepted it and nodded slightly before leaving. Insur and Palace Keeper Sijun remained in the penthouse. Fort Master, do you really think Jian Yi can help you change our current situation? Sijun inquired. I don't know. Insur shook her head. But my father always had a way to spot the right people. He must have seen immense possibilities in Jian Yi since he recognized that Jian Yi would be of great help for me, and even made a deal with him using the Fengtian scroll. I'll naturally do my very best to help him grow, since father firmly believes in him, offering me great help. Palace Keep Sijin solemnly said, "That's indeed quite true. The old master was an undying saint, and had seen things that our kind won't possibly believe after all. Besides, Jian Yi is indeed extraordinary from the abilities he displayed. Jian Yi relied on his own strength to fight against 3 heaven ultimate gods a few decades ago, when Scorpion King had fallen. However, his cultivation level was only at high-level Earth ultimate god, yet could easily pass through the sacred heaven road to reach the summit within an hour. These 2 instances are amazing enough. I have seen many geniuses as the Sacred Palace Keeper, such as some of the demons in Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to present a genius who is comparable to him even for Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, who boast of accepting only the best." No, Insur shook her head. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is full of geniuses, and those you normally see aren't necessarily their best. I've at least heard of one person who's regarded as the most extraordinary genius in Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's history, with talents that exceed our imagination. That person's talent is probably even higher than Jian Yi. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has such genius. Palace Keeper Sijun was shocked. "I've only heard of this person, but never the pleasure to meet her. She's a woman who's quite young," said Insur before diverted back to their topic. "Anyways, this Jian Yi is worth our complete efforts to nurture. He can at least become of great help if he could grow stronger, even if he can't become someone who can single-handedly change our situation in Crimson Stone Fort, as my father expected. As long as he becomes a grand ultimate god in the future, the help he can provide will be even greater than Scorpion King's." Scorpion King, as Palace Keeper Sijin, fell silent as Scorpion King's name was mentioned. Scorpion King was absolutely loyal to Crimson Stone Saint, just like him, and gave his all to assist Insur. The 2 of them might as well be considered Insur's left and right hands. Scorpion King and he were like brothers who had been through so much. However, the Scorpion King fell. Most importantly, they knew how he fell and who had killed him, but had no ability to avenge him at that moment. It was truly their biggest regret. It's only a matter of time before we avenge the Scorpion King, but our current urgency is to straighten out Yun Shan and the Blood Thunder King. Our resources were tight before, but having this batch of blood gems has bought us some time and slightly reduced the pressures I've been facing. Insur's expression was cold, but her eyes were shining with a strange light of hope. As for the divine elixir pills that Jian Yi needs, he probably uses them to increase his cultivation level. I'll do my very best to help him get them while I'll let you take care of the other matters. Try to provide as much as you can if he has other needs, and report to me any time if there are any movements or increases in his abilities, reminded Insur. Sijin nodded respectfully. Insur did not stay any longer and left after giving a few more instructions. Chapter 2661. Space-Time Beast the Sacred Palace was a place where Crimson Stone Fort nurtured geniuses, and it was where geniuses were plenty. After becoming one of the many disciples there, Jian Wushuang took a stroll in the vicinity. The sacred palace was very large and contained quite a lot of specific places for cultivation. Jian Wushuang was checking out the cultivation spaces that were more or less helpful to cultivate the understanding of certain laws or principles one by one. Even though the cultivation spaces were really quite helpful to regular genius disciples at Earth Ultimate God level, they were of little use for Jian Wushuang, whose battle strength was sufficient to withstand high-level heaven ultimate gods. He passed by many cultivation spaces along the way, but nothing seemed satisfactory enough for him to join and study, especially the Sword Principal Palace that he just walked by. Although the Sword Principal Palace claimed to be one that specialized in sword principles with various kinds of sword techniques to be studied inside, there isn't much to study with my current achievement. I could perhaps study those sword skills before my sword principle reaches the sword world's profound achievement, but now I can see through their fundamentals. Jian Wushuang sighed. Secretly, there were various cultivation spaces along the way, with only a handful being of little help to him. He arrived at a huge green palace at that moment. The incredibly wide green palace, with a special space-time energy surrounding it, had caught Jian Wushuang's attention. At the palace door, a purple-clad old man stood there like an old Zen monk with his eyes closed as someone walked out of the palace right at that moment. "Senior brother." Jian Wushuang went up to him. A down-to-earth-looking big man raised his head and asked, "Yes, can I help you?" "Well, I'm unfamiliar with a lot of matters here, as I've just arrived at the sacred palace. I would like to ask Senior Brother, what is inside this palace?" Jian Wushuang asked. The down-to-earth man answered, "This palace is the Space-Time Palace. It's a place disciples use to study space-time law with quite an amazing space-time beast in the palace. You're welcome to go in and try if you're studying space-time law, but you'll need to have enough sacred points." "Is that so?" Jian Wushuang was slightly moved. Space-Time Palace was used for studying space-time law, and it just so happened that it was what he studied. "Thank you, Senior Brother." Jian Wushuang thanked him and immediately walked towards the Space-Time Palace's entrance. Once he arrived at the door, the meditating monk-like old man in purple clothes opened his eyes and gazed at him. "Spending a month in the Space-Time Palace requires 10 sacred points." Sacred points. Jian Wushuang was weirded out. He knew that sacred points were widely circulated contribution credits among the Sacred Palace disciples gained through carrying out missions, exchanging treasures, or even through battle gambles with fellow disciples. "I just arrived at Sacred Palace and have no sacred points, but Palace Keeper Sijun had instructed that any resources in the Sacred Palace are unconditionally open for me to use. Entering the Space-Time Palace should be within my rights," said Jian Wushuang. "All resources are opened unconditionally for you." "His Excellency, the Palace Keeper, said that to you personally?" The purple-clad old man looked at him in surprise. "Indeed, you can always check in with Palace Keeper Sijun if you don't believe me." Jian Wushuang smiled. The old man did not completely believe him, and thereafter inquired through his message token before very soon received a reply. "His Excellency really gave such an order?" The old man looked in disbelief before taking a good look at Jian Wushuang. He then said, "Please enter." "Thank you very much," said Jian Wushuang, who went straight into the Space-Time Palace. The down-to-earth man that Jian Wushuang just talked to went up after he entered. "Elder Purple, what's going on? How come you let that man just now in without giving you any sacred points?" he asked in surprise. Normally, the Sacred Palace disciples had to pay sacred points before they could enter into the Space-Time Palace. Well, the old man mumbled for a short while before he summarized Palace Sijun's instructions. Goodness, who is he to have all the resources in the Sacred Palace open to him? How come he gets such special treatments? The down-to-earth man felt more envious than stunned. There was a gigantic plaza inside the Space-Time Palace with a dozen Sacred Palace disciples scattered around and sitting in lotus posture. In the foremost part of the plaza was a huge black statue. "That's big." Jian Wushuang raised his head to stare at the black statue. The incredibly big black statue was 3,000 meters tall. The nose-less black beast had a triangular head, huge eyes, and a tiny mouth. It had 2 horns on its forehead and looked incredibly fierce. Its body was covered in cold black scales. Every one of those black scales was the size of an adult human, which spread across every corner of the figure like black fire. It looked very vivid, as though it was alive. Jian Wushuang felt uncontrollably moved upon his very first glance at the black beast, as he could sense strong space-time energy from the beast. The space-time energy was covering the entire beast's body, and even on each scale, Jian Wushuang even felt that every scale on the black beast's body contained space-time law. His soul power did a thorough search, and discovered there were exactly 1,000 scale pieces on the beast. Space-time beast. Is this what the senior brother just now referred to as the space-time beast? Jian Wushuang mumbled. He immediately sat down in a lotus style on the plaza and closed his eyes before beginning his studies. It took a short moment before Jian Wushuang sensed something. Every scale on the black beast represented a piece of space-time law. 1,000 scale pieces mean 1,000 pieces of space-time law. The space-time law's first stage could form 1,000 apparitions. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself quietly and soon got his answer. Every space-time law on the 1,000 scales indeed represents 1,000 apparitions. Once I've understood the space-time law on all of the scales, I can conjure 1,000 apparitions. It then means I've completed the first stage of space-time laws, which is also the limit. The space-time law has to evolve once again, after that towards the second stage. Chapter 2662. Second stage, space-time strangulation. Jian Wushuang had fully immersed himself in understanding the space-time beast. Forming apparitions was merely the first stage and step of space-time law. There was the second stage, third stage, and so on after that. Jian Wushuang had been using Fengtian Scroll to increase his understanding of laws within the 40 years' journey from northern Darkstar territory to Danyang continent. His understanding of space-time law and transmigration law had tremendously increased at that point. He could concurrently already form 1,000 apparitions when it came to space-time law. In other words, he had achieved the limit of space-time law's first stage. However, he had not taken his step into the second stage. Jian Wushuang had found a trace of opportunity from the space-time beast to cross into the second stage at that moment. Those scales, Jian Wushuang's soul power energy was scrutinized on every single scale. Those scales had become one entity within his senses. There were 1,000 scales, yet it felt like there was only one scale. Those scales, which had the first stage of space-time law, were evolving to its extreme. However, the space-time law within the scales continued to evolve and gradually evolved into a gigantic space-time black hole following Jian Wushuang's continued studies. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, the huge space-time beast in front of him had vanished and only to be replaced with a terrifying space-time black hole. Infinite strangulation energy swept into all directions within the space-time black hole. Strangulation, space-time strangulation. Jian Wushuang was shaken in the heart. Space-time law's first stage was the formation of apparition, while its second stage was space-time strangulation. One had to learn to control the power of space-time strangulation at that stage. Jian Wushuang had been exploring all those years, but had not been able to find anything. However, he could see the complete evolution form of the space-time law through the space-time beast. Is that so? That is how space-time law's first stage evolves to the second stage. The space-time law that Jian Wushuang had control began to evolve according to the evolution process on the space-time beast. Time passed day after day, and very soon Jian Wushuang had stayed in the space-time palace for a good half-month. He finally opened his eyes and smiled joyfully, while still sitting in lotus style at the plaza. Second stage, successful. He felt very happy inside. Previously, he did not look forward much to the cultivation resources the sacred palace had to offer. Those resources were not of much use to cultivators at the heaven ultimate God realm and above. However, who would have thought he was lucky enough to find a space-time beast statue there? The space-time beast contained the space-time law's evolution, and it just so happened to be very helpful for him. After carefully studying, it had immensely helped his understanding of space-time law. Every breakthrough to a new stage in space-time law is a huge leap forward, which causes fundamental changes in the control of space-time law. There are too many people here, so let me go find a quiet place to try it out. Jian Wushuang stood up right away and exited the space-time palace. The purple-clad old man still had his eyes closed and was standing like a meditating old monk outside the space-time palace. His eyelids twitched as he realized Jian Wushuang had just walked out and gave him a glance without speaking. Jian Wushuang arrived on an empty field. Let's try. Jian Wushuang's body suddenly moved with a sense of longing in his eyes. Space-time law energy burst out in an instant as his figure suddenly glided out. There were no apparitions as Jian Wushuang moved to the end of the field in a flash and was back to where he was in another. From beginning to end, his figure did not leave a trace, at least to bare eyes in the void, such that even the ordinary heaven ultimate gods would not be able to see his figure. Fast, too fast. Although there were no apparitions, it's 10 times faster than when forming apparitions. This speed is a whole other concept altogether. Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Speed had always been his forte. The speed that he previously had could be considered extremely fast among heaven ultimate gods. However, it was not comparable to his newly possessed speed. Jian Wushuang believed that even ordinary primary-level heaven ultimate gods would not have time to react if he were to perform attacks with such terrifying speeds. Even if high-level heaven ultimate god could respond, their defense would still seem very embarrassing under his high-speed attacks. Law understanding would become harder and harder from then on. In the first stage of space-time law, one's understanding would increase following the increase of apparitions alongside one's speed increment. However, ordinary primary-level heaven ultimate gods who studied space-time law could only form 300 to 400 apparitions at most. One had to be a high-level heaven ultimate god to be able to form 600 or 700 apparitions. Forming 1,000 apparitions was the first stage's limit. Many top high-level heaven ultimate gods, or even ordinary peak heaven ultimate gods, could reach that level. Jian Wushuang was also once at that level. However, there were not many who could reach the second stage of space-time law, even among peak heaven ultimate gods, but Jian Wushuang did. In other words, his existing understanding of space-time law was extremely strong even amongst peak heaven ultimate gods, and so was his speed. Many peak heaven ultimate gods would not be able to catch up to his speed. Furthermore, his space-time energy control had increased a great deal after arriving at that level, which did not only show in his speed. There were many more. Space-time strangulation. Jian Wushuang's body shook as huge strangulation energy burst out and covered the entire field within it. The strangulation energy was extremely overpowering and cutting everything in a frenzy. He was certain that cultivators below heaven ultimate gods would have turned into tiny bits in the blink of an eye were they to be in the field. Even the ordinary primary-level heaven ultimate gods would find it difficult to fend off the strangulation energy. Most importantly, one could not hide at all under that strangulation energy, like many space-time tactics like the space-time apparition, and would be crushed in a split second. At that moment, Jian Wushuang gradually raised his palms as the huge strangulation energy around him gathered in his hands. In the blink of an eye, a half-meter-length, small, shapeless wind blade appeared in Jian Wushuang's hand. Although the wind blade was not big, its power and strangulation energy contained therein was terrifyingly strong. Chapter 2663. Space-Time Blade. Is this the space-time blade after reaching the space-time law's second stage? Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he examined the invisible blade in his hand. The space-time blade was formed by condensing the strangulation power. It was powerful enough to destroy the world. The space-time blade was not only good as a weapon, but could also be integrated into one's moves and techniques. Jian Wushuang, as a sword cultivator, could integrate the space-time blade into his sword techniques. Let's try it. Jian Wushuang was eager to try out the blade as Blood Mountain's sword appeared in his hand before swinging his sword out. It was just an ordinary sword movement with him, just casually wielding his sword, but with the space-time blade enveloping his sword technique. The power of his sword technique and space-time blade's strangulation power superimposed on each other as his sword fell. The erupted power disrupted the void before him. This power, Jian Wushuang was amazed. He just did a casual move, but even such sword power was probably capable of threatening an ordinary high-level heaven ultimate god. Even a casual sword movement would be terrifying with this space-time blade. The power will be even more powerful if combined with the space-time sword technique I've created. Jian Wushuang clasped both hands together. Moreover, I've just reached the second stage of space-time law, and only managed to control the space-time blade's first style as of now. I'm sure there's still a huge room for improvement in the future. Just like the space-time apparition, space-time blade was capable of becoming stronger as Jian Wushuang made progress in space-time law. Rumor had it that those experts who reached the second stage understanding in space-time law could single-handedly discharge hundreds or even 1,000 space-time blades, with each space-time blades powerful enough to kill a primary-level heaven ultimate god. How horrible would it be for a discharge of hundreds or even 1,000 space-time blades at the same time? It would simply be a nightmare when they were sent forth if those hundreds of space-time blades were condensed and integrated into his offensive moves. Understanding the laws will get harder with progress. I've just reached the second stage and gained control of space-time blades' first style. I'm afraid it'll be quite a while before I can take control of the second style, muttered Jian Wushuang indifferently. He had a very high understanding of the space-time law, but the same could not be said for his transmigration law understanding, which was quite far behind. His understanding of transmigration law had also reached the first stage's limits, and was only one step away from the second stage, but who knew when he would finally be able to reach the second stage? In terms of sword principles, profound achievement sword world was common among heaven ultimate gods. However, his sword world could extend up to 100,000 miles when Jian Wushuang displayed its full potential with powers comparable to a complete sword world, with Jian Wushuang's sword world probably being stronger. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's understanding of laws and sword principles was considered strong among the heaven ultimate gods. The only part he lacked was his cultivation realm. I've stayed in front of the space-time beast for more than half a month. I wonder if Yin Sewer and Palace Keeper Sijun have gotten the divine elixir pills for me. Jian Wushuang immediately went to visit Palace Keeper Sijun inside a huge manor in the sacred palace. Jian Yi, this is where you'll live. I've made it clear that no one should disturb you unless there's something urgent. In addition, there are 2 message tokens here belonging to 2 very powerful sacred palace elders. You can send a message to these 2 elders if you have any needs during your time in the sacred palace. Feel free to message me if they aren't able to help you. Palace Keeper Sijun handed 2 tokens to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly after receiving both tokens. He knew that Palace Keeper Sijun was busy due to his position in the sacred palace, so he would not have time to deal with petty matters. Most of the day-to-day issues were left in the hands of sacred palace elders. Erase an interspatial ring, which the fort master asked me to give you a few days ago. It contains the divine elixir pills you need. The fort master was unable to prepare many of them for you in such a short time frame. Only 800. I heard you've been meditating in the space-time hall, so I didn't interrupt you at that time. Hence, I'll give this to you now. Palace Keeper Sijun gave an interspatial ring to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang simply glanced inside, and there were indeed 800 divine elixir pills within. 800 pills. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. 800 divine elixir pills were only a measly amount to the fort master of Danyang Holy Domain. But Jian Wushuang was aware of the difficult situation Insuer was in. She must have paid a huge price or sacrificed a great deal to gather those 800 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang would not complain about it. Besides, those 800 divine elixir pills were enough to raise his cultivation realm by another level. All right, I've handed it to you, so I'll make a move first, as I still have a lot of matters to deal with. Carry on with your cultivation and don't let the two fort masters down, said Palace Keeper Sijun solemnly before turning around and leaving. Jian Wushuang looked at the interspatial ring in his hand with a strange expression after Palace Keeper Sijun left. Insuer must have high expectations of me for her to willingly gather 800 divine elixir pills in her current situation. I can't let her down if that's the case. Jian Wushuang smiled. He then immediately began refining and absorbing those divine elixir pills' power in seclusion within the manor's secret chamber. He had sold 10 caddies of royal blood gems and liquid life to get a total of 520 divine elixir pills in Wushui territory 28 years ago. He only needed 120 divine elixir pills to successfully make a breakthrough from the primary level Earth Ultimate God Realm to the high-level Earth Ultimate God Realm. He absorbed and refined the remaining 400 divine elixir pills to accumulate some divine power in his body. In the last 28 years, he had absorbed a fair bit of divine power on his own, which meant that he had accumulated quite a lot of divine power. Therefore, he was not too far from making a breakthrough to the peak Earth Ultimate God Realm. Jian Wushuang predicted that he should be able to break through and reach the peak Earth Ultimate God Realm had he refined and absorbed all 800 divine elixir pills before him. It took Jian Wushuang a full 5 months to absorb all 800 divine elixir pills and managed to make a breakthrough and reach the peak Earth Ultimate God Realm as he had intended. His divine power skyrocketed again as soon as he made a breakthrough, with his overall strength increased by leaps and bounds. Chapter 2664. Be mine. My divine power has skyrocketed again after making a breakthrough to peak Earth Ultimate God Realm. I should now be able to fight head-on with any peak Earth Ultimate God I met when coupled with the improvement on space-time law. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly. Oh, right. Jian Wushuang was suddenly reminded of something and flipped his hand to take out a baby's fist-sized golden stone. Jian Wushuang stared strangely at the golden stone. It was the golden stone he bought from the star-picking pavilion auction for the price of 5 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang bought it despite no one being interested in the golden stone at the time, because he felt faint traces of the space-time fluctuation within the golden stone due to his familiarity with the space-time law. He carefully looked into it after his purchase and was certain of the golden stone's extraordinaire, but his understanding of space-time law was too low for him to find out more about the golden stone at that time. He thought of trying again, once his space-time law understanding had greatly improved. Jian Wushuang sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and sent his soul power into the stone. He soon sensed the space-time fluctuations in the golden stone again, which was clearer this time. He gradually formed a connection with the golden stone through those sensations. The connection established was like a key to unlocking the secret chamber's door, as he finally discovered the mystery within the golden stone. Rumbling, Jian Wushuang felt his world turn and head buzzing. He found himself in a huge space-time storm in the blink of an eye. Ho ho ho! The space-time storm flooded all corners of the world with strangulation powers far more powerful than Jian Wushuang's space-time blade. Moreover, space-time was frozen in many places within the space-time storm's coverage. There were also pieces of space that were constantly being shattered up and reorganized. It was indeed a huge space-time world, just like the space-time world created by Jian Wushuang in Thousand Treasures' Grand World. However, its features and strength were much more powerful and impressive. An extremely tall, magnificent-looking golden palace gate was located right in the center of the space-time storm, with a hint of mystery inside it. Jian Wushuang could sense the vast space-time powers within it, which seemed to lead toward a different space-time. Jian Wushuang was standing under the golden palace. He raised his head to look at the awe-inspiring palace gate before him, and was shocked to feel a great level of pressure. Where is this place? Jian Wushuang was scanning his surroundings. He knew he was inside a consciousness space. Consciousness spaces were simulations, and the fact that it felt so real only meant the void existed in the real world. A similar special space existed within the ancient god domain that had the same magnificent golden palace gates, just like the one in front of him. So the magnificent golden gate before me is the mystery within this golden stone. Jian Wushuang murmured. Suddenly, buzz! A primitive yet attractive breath of aura permeated from within the palace gates. A mighty voice also came from the other side of the palace gate. Come through the space-time gate, enter my space-time palace, and become one of my people. The voice seemed to contain some special magical power as it reverberated in Jian Wushuang's ears again and again, refusing to go away for a long time. Jian Wushuang stood under the golden palace gate and was completely startled. He had inferred the golden stone's true purpose. The golden stone was a standard trial that would bring one's consciousness into the golden palace gate's consciousness space, as long as they could sense the space-time fluctuations in the golden stone and form connections with it. On the other side of the golden palace gates was the space-time palace mentioned by the voice. Space-time palace. There was also a space-time palace within the sacred palace, housing a space-time beast in it, which had helped him make great progress in understanding the space-time law. Jian Wushuang could see that the space-time palace before him was unusual from its golden gate to the crazy space-time storm and astounding tactics coupled with the mysterious golden stone. It was very likely made by some true top powers within the ancient god domain, the likes of Sacred Palace, or even the 9 realms of Golden Crow could be compared to. Besides that, he could see from the name Space-Time Palace to the tactics exposed to him. The palace was all about space-time. Jian Wushuang was able to arrive in that space with the golden stones, help due to his familiarity with space-time law. There were 2 paths laid before him, to go in or not. Jian Wushuang was hesitating. According to the voice he heard, he would be a member of the palace once he crossed the golden palace gates. However, he knew nothing about the palace or what it did, and also had no idea which camp he should be in. Even if the space-time palace was in the same camp as the 3 great sacred realms in ancient god domain, it would be interesting for him to get into the space-time palace, which might be guided by the head of 3 divine realms. In addition, there was an important point in which he did not know where the strength of the space-time palace lay, and whether it would be controlling the experts reporting to it. He did not dare to enter the palace due to these considerations. If he refused to enter the palace, not everyone was able to appear in the space or stand in front of the Golden Palace gate and enter the gate to become a member of the Space-Time Palace. Judging from the golden stone he possessed, it was a great opportunity for him to improve in understanding the space-time law. He was tempted with such a great opportunity presented before him. Jian Wushuang hesitated for a long time in front of the Golden Palace gates before finally raising his head. Let's take a chance. There was a sparkle of anticipation in his eyes. Such a great opportunity is in front of me. I can't waste it, as I can't be bothered too much about the position and nature of this space-time palace. Even if the space-time palace is in the same camp as the three great sacred realms, the enemy of the Seven Stars Black Sect, it'll find a way to escape after growing stronger. Jian Wushuang finally decided after taking a deep breath before stepping out and entering the Golden Palace gates. Chapter 2665, Space-Time Divine Technique, outside the Golden Palace gates, was a huge space-time storm. However, on the other end of the Golden Palace gate was a dark and calm void. Jian Wushuang stood on the void's periphery while looking straight ahead with a dazed look. A figure stood tall in front of him where his eyes were focused. The figure was 3 yards tall and wearing a simple but clean white robe. The figure seems vague from where Jian Wushuang was, so he could not see its appearance very well. All he could perceive was the figure standing in the center of the dark void with his hands behind his back. The entire dark void was extremely quiet, with not the slightest sound nor movement. Jian Wushuang was staring at the tall figure in a white robe who gave him a weird feeling. It seemed that the figure was standing in the void right in front of Jian Wushuang, yet felt like it might not even exist after all in space-time. The tall figure in a white robe appeared out of place, but also seemed to have completely integrated with his surrounding space-time. It was out of place, yet it seemed to perfectly blend in. The two were completely different concepts from each other, but at the same time appeared simultaneously in the tall, white-robed figure. This person, Jian Wushuang, was confused. A dozen figures came into the dark void at an astonishing speed, not far from away without warning, and instantly broke the calmness. Even though it was quite far away, the sound of breaking winds produced by those figures moving through the void could be heard from Jian Wushuang's location. Jian Wushuang immediately looked in that direction and noticed a total of 13 males and females in the void. Although Jian Wushuang could not sense their divine power breath, his instincts told him that any one of them could give him quite a bit of scare. He was sure those 13 people were at least undying saints or higher. Among the 13 undying saints, one of them was a fair-skinned bald boy who was running away from the remaining 12 people chasing after him frantically at the back. They were incredibly fast in the chase and flee. Jian Wushuang thought he was fast enough after achieving the second stage in space-time law, but was shocked to discover that he was still far behind when compared with any of those 13 people. At the speed they were going, those 13 people instantly appeared in front of both Jian Wushuang and the tall, white-robed figure. Is that person going to take action? Jian Wushuang immediately looked at the tall, white-robed figure. The tall, white-robed figure then made a move as expected. Jian Wushuang thought the tall, white-robed figure had unfathomable power and might perhaps display his magnificent power to rescue the bald boy. However, the white-robed figure did not do much at all. Nothing was coming out of his body, not his aura nor divine power breath. He slowly raised his right hand and pointed at the void, where those 12 experts were. All he did was point a finger. Jian Wushuang did not see explosive divine power from the figure, but the pointing finger had moved the world and space-time. The 12 experts who were madly chasing after the bald boy stopped in their tracks abruptly without any warning. They had stopped in their tracks while still keeping their skimming posture, such that even their expressions were frozen in place. Apart from their frozen statues, even their surrounding void had completely become stagnant. It felt as though space-time had completely stopped. Space-time had indeed gone completely still. As space-time in the void completely halted, the 12 experts in the void maintained the same posture along with their thoughts, and consciousness also stopped. The space-time in other voids was still normal without a change apart from the void surrounding those 12 experts. The tall, white-robed figure slowly stepped forward and approached the bald boy and took him away. The void space-time began to flow again once both of them had completely walked away. The 12 experts had also resumed their motions, but were struck in the daze while staring around blankly. They did not know what had happened, as even their consciousness was halted. They remembered chasing after the bald boy before he suddenly disappeared right under their noses. As for the actual events, they knew and noticed nothing. Jian Wushuang saw everything that transpired while standing on the dark void's edge. Did space-time just went completely still? Jian Wushuang's eyes widened in shock. It was horrifying. The tall, white-robed figure had used a horrifying tactic. Jian Wushuang was frightened. The space-time in the vast void stopped with just a finger pointed from a distance. What an incredible power! Jian Wushuang had the opportunity to witness such supernatural power with his own eyes in the consciousness space. A message suddenly popped into his head, just as Jian Wushuang was still in shock. Space-time divine technique, a finger-pointing heavenly technique. Jian Wushuang was both physically and mentally shocked. He finally obtained the finger techniques named the tall, white-robed figure had just displayed, and also understood the reason behind his appearance in the dark void. It turned out the Golden Palace gates were not leading to a space-time palace, but into a consciousness space with unique secret techniques. The secret technique was called space-time divine technique. It was not a secret technique, to be precise, but a divine technique. Jian Wushuang did not know what divine technique was, but the finger movement the tall, white-robed figure used earlier had astonished him. In his previous life, he had also seen many top experts in the ancient god domain, like the head of 3 divine realms, performing their tactics, with many of their methods being able to be fully displayed due to world constraints. The ones that they could perform did not impress Jian Wushuang. If he had to pick the most memorable one, it was his master Xian Yi's tactic to resurrect both his and Lung Rushwang's souls. The space-time inversion technique. He was sleeping when his master performed the space-time inversion technique, so he technically did not see his master performing it. In any case, the tactic the tall, white-robed figure had just performed was shocking enough. The tactic, called a finger-pointing heavenly technique, was part of the space-time secret technique. Chapter 2666. A finger-pointing heavenly technique. A finger-pointing heavenly technique concept was by quickly freezing the space-time of a certain area. It was equivalent to a space-time freeze tactic. The tactic was powerful and terrifying. The tall, white-robed figure Jian Wushuang did not show the technique's full potential. Among the messages Jian Wushuang received, the divine technique was able to freeze a continent to which the space-time could remain stagnant for 100 years to thousands, and at the extreme, even tens of thousands of years. In other words, tens of thousands of years would have passed, but time would not move by even a second in the frozen continent. That was unbelievable. In the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang had already walked out of the consciousness space and slowly opened his eyes. The finger-pointing heavenly technique is scary, but it's only one of the many tricks in space-time divine technique. Jian Wushuang exclaimed. A finger-pointing heavenly technique was not the only technique in space-time divine technique. Jian Wushuang discovered from the Golden Stone that there were at least 2 types of magical power, and the finger-pointing heavenly technique was just one of the techniques. As for the other technique, Jian Wushuang was probably unable to sense it due to his still shallow perception of the space-time law. Jian Wushuang looked at the Golden Stone strangely. The Golden Stone brought me into the consciousness space and made me form a connection with Space-Time Palace, but the Golden Stone did not contain any information about the Space-Time Palace, but only contained 2 types of space-time divine technique. What could the Golden Stone made by the Space-Time Palace do? Jian Wushuang was quite puzzled. That was a question he could not answer for the time being. Just let it be. The space-time divine technique is so powerful and happens to appear before me, so I can't miss it. It'll start with figuring out a finger-pointing heavenly technique. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, and soon he closed his eyes and began meditating meticulously. He could enter the consciousness space at will through the connection he formed with the golden stone in his hand. As such, he repeatedly watched the scene performed by the tall, white-robed figure, while personally experiencing the tactics effects and potentials amidst also figuring out how to master the technique. He had all the conditions needed to master the technique except sufficient perception capabilities. Jian Wushuang had always been fast in understanding laws and techniques. He was completely immersed in meditating and trying to understand the technique, such that he had completely forgotten about everything else. Time flew past. The sacred palace had been calm, with many disciples using various resources in the sacred palace to improve their strength. As for the Crimson Stone Fort, Yin Suer was indeed in a worrisome situation before Jian Wushuang's arrival. The pressure on her had reduced a fair bit as the situation in Crimson Stone Fort stabilized once again after Jian Wushuang gave the blood gems to Yin Suer. It was like giving her a chance in a new life. There were no major events in the Crimson Stone Fort. 9 years passed in a flash under such a calm situation. Jian Wushuang, who had been meditating for 9 years in the secret chamber, finally opened his eyes. I barely mastered a finger-pointing heavenly technique after 9 years. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together with a surprised look. As a perfect chaotic creature, Jian Wushuang had exceptional comprehension skills. He was extremely fast in comprehending various secret techniques and tactics. The 5 strongest secret techniques from the 7 Stars Black Sect were easy for him, as he only spent a very short time on them. However, he had spent altogether 9 years in full concentration to comprehend a finger-pointing heavenly technique. The divine technique was indeed hard to comprehend. Although I've just barely grasped the technique, I'm afraid the power I'm able to discharge is just 1 out of 1,000% from its full potential. It's currently still quite useful for me. At the same time, my understanding of space-time law has also improved a lot. I can go to the space-time beast next and try to process what I've managed to master in the past 9 years. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He soon stood up and headed to the space-time palace located in the sacred palace. A large number of sacred palace disciples and experts were gathered on a vast combat field in the sacred palace, with an ongoing battle in the center of the combat field. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A series of spear shadows with powerful strangulation power emerged. A girl clothed in black, with a menacing look, had completely blended into the darkness, while the spear in her hand was like a poisonous snake. The extremely powerful spear was moving around strangely and swiftly. The huge principal world spread far and wide as the black-clothed girl was fighting against a quite well-known high-level Earth ultimate god disciple from the sacred palace. The genius disciple had an extremely high understanding of the laws and principles. However, he looked exceptionally awkward in front of the black-clothed girl. He was wielding his saber, but it was neither a match against the black girl's spear in terms of speed nor power. The genius principal world was completely suppressed, as the black-clothed girl's dark law perception was much higher. Suppression. The battle was all about suppression from the beginning. A moment later, the high-level Earth ultimate god genius disciple was easily defeated by the black-clothed girl. After she defeated the genius disciple, the black-clothed girl withdrew her spear and stood there shaking her head. Weak, so weak. He's very ordinary, whether in terms of his perception in law or principles understanding. I'm afraid he's just mediocre among the high-level Earth ultimate god disciples of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The black-clothed girl was telling the truth as she spoke her mind without any sugar-coating. Perhaps it had something to do with her personality. There were a large number of Sacred Palace disciples around, with some experts from Sacred Palace looking a little ugly when they heard her statement. They were helpless. The genius who had just been defeated by the black-clothed girl was the top disciple among the high-level Earth ultimate gods in Sacred Palace, yet he was still easily defeated by the black-clothed girl. It did not just happen once. 3 figures were standing behind the black-clothed girl. The 3 figures, with a touch of chilliness and arrogance between their eyebrows, looked very young, but their divine power breaths were extraordinary. Chapter 2667. Someone familiar, just like the black-clothed girl. Those 3 people were also from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. They were the black-clothed girl's 3 senior brothers, who were much stronger than the black-clothed girl in terms of cultivation realms and overall strength. Among the black-clothed girl's 3 senior brothers, 2 peak Earth ultimate gods had already taken action against the Sacred Palace's peak Earth ultimate gods. The Sacred Palace disciples had no room for struggle and were not a match to the both of them. They were frustrated and angry from their incapability, but could only hold back their emotions. They were secretly sighing in their hearts. They were also geniuses from the Sacred Palace, but the geniuses recruited by Dragon Phoenix Pavilion from all over the 9 realms of Golden Crows were much stronger. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's talented disciples were not only better in terms of their overall strength, but also in other aspects. What are the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples doing here at Sacred Palace? Are they here just to show off their talents and strength? Who knows? We aren't the one who invited them to come anyway. I heard that the people from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had taken the initiative to visit Sacred Palace and paid a price to gather Sacred Palace disciples at the Space-Time Palace. The Palace Keeper must have agreed to us disciples learning from each other, as he wanted the talented disciples from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to show us a thing or two, so we know how far behind we are and quit being arrogant. Did the Palace Keeper do that? Many of the Sacred Palace disciples were secretly passing comments, as they felt the bitterness in their hearts. It was true that those Sacred Palace disciples were arrogant, as they had always thought of themselves as geniuses. However, they were nobodies in the face of those Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. The failure would probably teach them a lesson not to be complacent in the future. The black-clothed girl made her way to her 3 senior brothers. "They are too weak, so there's no point in fighting against them," said the black-clothed girl in disappointment. "Ha! I've told you not to have too high hopes." A young man with red hair smiled. If the Crimson Stone Fort had not fallen to their current state, the potential of their geniuses could be extremely high. Even though they might not be as good as us, the gap should not be so ridiculously wide. However, the level of Sacred Palace concentration camp's geniuses are no longer on par with us. Indeed, I heard some elders in the attic mentioned that Sacred Palace is no longer what it used to be after the fall of Crimson Stone Saint. ITLL probably take a lot of luck and a long time for them to cultivate a truly presentable genius, as they haven't had any in the last 1,000 years, said another handsome young man with a half-moon-like face. "We've already fought these Sacred Palace disciples per the Palace Keeper Sijun's requirements and have achieved what we wanted. There's no need to waste time with them. Let's go to the Space-Time Palace now." Among the many cultivation places within the Sacred Palace, only the space-time beast inside the Space-Time Palace could be helpful to us, said a cold voice. It was the burly man at the back with a dark golden stone staff on his back. Yes, Senior Brother Tion Exion. The black-clothed girl, along with the other 2 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples, immediately nodded when the burly man spoke, no longer dared to talk anymore. Those people from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion soon went straight to the Space-Time Palace, led by the experts from Sacred Palace. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged under the space-time beast with a regretful look. What a pity! Although the space-time beast is amazing, its evolution in space-time law had only reached the early stage of its strangulation power. My current space-time law understanding is already at this level. ITLL only allow me to be more familiar with the space-time law if I continue doing this, and that's not much use to me. Jian Wushuang quickly walked out of the space-time palace after shaking his head. As he stepped out of the space-time palace, Jian Wushuang coincidentally bumped into the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples who were walking toward him. Many disciples, as well as Sacred Palace experts, were following behind the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. So many people. Jian Wushuang was surprised. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples had also noticed Jian Wushuang. It's him. A low voice suddenly came from the black-clothed girl among the 4 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. This black-clothed girl, who ravaged many high-level Earth Ultimate God disciples from Sacred Palace in the battle earlier, was powerful and had treated the other Sacred Palace disciples condescendingly, but she was stunned to see Jian Wushuang. Her eyes became extremely solemn while she stared closely at Jian Wushuang. Oh, someone familiar. Jian Wushuang also noticed the black-clothed girl as the corner of his mouth curled up. That was not the first time he saw the black-clothed girl, as they had even fought against each other before. He recalled that the other party had shown some extraordinary techniques and even brought him a little pressure. Hence, the black-clothed girl was rather memorable to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang later learned that the black-clothed girl was a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Junior sister, do you know this person? The red-haired young man next to her looked over. Of course I do. The black-clothed girl's voice became low. The 3 of you should have heard me talking about him before. I went on a mission to an ordinary stellar region decades ago, while still a primary-level ultimate god, and fought against a similarly ranked genius before being defeated. I heard you mention this before. Could he be the one? The red-haired young man immediately turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. The handsome young man with the half-moon face, and even the cold-looking burly man Tian Xian, also shot a glance at Jian Wushuang. That's him. The black-clothed girl was the 5th opponent Jian Wushuang encountered during the Blood Gladiator Challenge on the northern Darkstar continent. The ancient witch said in a low voice, I was defeated by his shocking strength decades ago and haven't seen him for decades. I didn't expect him to be at the Sacred Palace. He seems to be one of the Sacred Palace disciples, and his cultivation realm. He made a breakthrough at a faster pace than me. The ancient witch was a little horrified when she noticed that. She was the much-loved Dragon Phoenix Pavilion princess with a powerful master guiding her alongside a steady supply of resources for self-improvement. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang had to collect a large number of primordial stones and divine elixir pills to improve his divine power, while the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion paid a great price to construct a divine power fountain. Chapter 2668. The stakes. The divine power fountain in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion contained unlimited divine power, allowing her to achieve high-level Earth Ultimate God from primary-level Ultimate God within a short period of 10 years because it obviously had a lot to do with her being talented and fast at understanding the laws and principles. However, the ancient witch did not expect Jian Wushuang's realm cultivation to not only be comparable with her, but was even at an entire realm higher. She could feel Jian Wushuang's divine power that had obviously achieved peak-level Earth Ultimate God. How did he cultivate? The ancient witch directly rushed forward with a slight doubtfulness. Jian, we meet again. The ancient witch spoke in a cold and slightly unfriendly voice. This is quite a coincidence. Who knew I'll bump into you here at the Sacred Palace? Jian Wushuang was also quite surprised as he knew the ancient witch's identity. The heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion actually came to this sacred palace. The ancient witch had a cold look in her eyes. Humph, did you remember what I've previously said? I ask that you don't bump into me again, or it'll definitely get you back next time and win. I've finally met you today. There's nothing else apart from fighting me. Fight against you? Are you sure? Jian Wushuang had an interesting smile as he unscrupulously emitted his peak Earth ultimate god divine power. His divine power was obviously one whole level stronger than the ancient witch. The ancient witch's face darkened and immediately shouted in a low voice, "If you are considerate, you'll only use the high-level Earth ultimate god's divine power similar to mine. Let's decide our victory based on our law's perception and principles understanding. What do you think?" Jian Wushuang's facial expression grew weirder as he heard that. The Sacred Palace disciples were also behaving extremely weirdly. Who's this? Is he also a disciple of our Sacred Palace? Why haven't we met him before? Yes, he's also a Sacred Palace disciple who entered via the Sacred Heaven Road 9 years ago. I heard rumors that he's very talented, but has always been in seclusion and seldom shows himself ever since entering the Sacred Palace. I wonder why he came out today. He seems to be an old acquaintance of the ancient, who has proactively challenged him. Sounds of chatters started surrounding them one by one. Wan Wushuang smiled indifferently. It's not every day the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's heavenly pride proactively challenges somebody. There's no reason for me not to accept this challenge. We shall follow your suggestion, and I'll only fight against you using the high-level Earth ultimate god's divine power. However, it doesn't seem interesting if we fight for nothing. Why don't we bet on something? Bet on something? A gamble fight. The ancient witch narrowed her eyes. The Sacred Palace disciples had surprised expressions on their faces. He actually brought up a gamble fight when he's fighting against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. This Jian Yi is really daring. He must have plucked his courage from the skies. Although he's a peak-level Earth ultimate god, the perception of the laws and understanding principles aren't differentiated by realms or levels. Although the ancient witch is only at the high-level Earth ultimate god, you can see that her law's perception and principles understanding is almost as good as a heaven ultimate god based on her actions. He must be suicidal to fight her. He brought up the gamble fight. Oh my God! All the Sacred Palace disciples felt that Jian Wushuang was extremely daring. The other heavenly prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion speechlessly looked at each other while smiling. They obviously were thinking the same as the Sacred Palace disciples. The ancient witch had her gaze set on Jian Wushuang. This Jian, he was able to defeat me in the previous fight because of his much stronger divine power than mine. However, his law perception and principles understanding weren't stronger than mine, as he didn't even have a clue about the principal world back then. His combat power might be stronger now that he has achieved peak Earth ultimate god, but his only advantage will be his divine power. Divine power aside, he definitely won't be my opponent based on his law's perception and principles understanding alone. The ancient witch was extremely confident. She was a genius. What did it mean by being a genius in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? Speedy level-ups in realms and cultivation meant nothing. A real genius would have scary improvements in law perception and principles understanding. Jian Wushuang could not be considered a true genius, yet in her opinion, the ancient witch asked, "Jian Yi, what do you want to bet on?" I know that you're from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and every Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple is from rich families. Let's bet on divine elixir pills since you're rich, said Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch directly said, "Divine elixir pills? Not a problem. How many do you want to bet?" "Not much. 100 pills," said Jian Wushuang without much care. What? The ancient witch was stunned. The sacred palace experts and those disciples around them were also shocked. Even the three prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion also glanced at Jian Wushuang in surprise. 100 divine elixir pills. Those were divine elixir pills and not primordial stones. One divine elixir pill was equal to 5 million primordial stones in the market using the simplest calculations. 100 divine elixir pills would be 500 million primordial stones. This was only using a simple calculation, and 100 divine elixir pills were definitely valued more than such. Jian Yi stood in front of her and just mentioned betting 100 divine elixir pills without any hesitation. How were 100 divine elixir pills a small amount? Why? The heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can't even come up with 100 divine elixir pills? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. No, it's just that, the ancient witch had a tight frown on her face. She was capable of coming up with 100 divine elixir pills, but that would be her entire savings. Apart from that, she would need to exchange it with some really special precious items, not to mention that she only had a dozen with her right now. At that moment, Junior, the red-haired young man from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, looked over. It's only 100 divine elixir pills. Just focus on fighting him. All three of your senior brothers will help gather these 100 divine elixir pills if you lose. Apart from divine power, how is it possible for you to lose to a sacred palace disciple with your abilities? The ancient witch was stunned before nodding. That's right. There's a difference between our divine power in the previous fight, but this time, I won't lose for sure. I'll bet with 100 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang had a weird smile when he saw the ancient witch agreeing to his terms. If that's the case, let's start. Humph! The ancient witch humphed softly and immediately made her move without any hesitation. Rumbling, it could be seen that a huge principal world was directly forced towards Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch had activated her principal world when she was at the primary level ultimate god. Her principal world grew increasingly stronger as her principal's understanding was elevated, which resulted in her current extremely powerful 30,000 kilometers principal world. Chapter 26, 69. Winning, she has succeeded in reaching the profound achievement principal world. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. In the Danyang Holy Domain, only some powerful peak Earth ultimate gods had achieved profound achievement in their principal worlds. Although the ancient, which was just at the Earth high-level ultimate god, she was the heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. It was impossible for her not to achieve it. The overpowering principal world repressed against Jian Wushuang, who did not immediately activate his sword world to contend against it. He stood there in silence as the ancient witch disappeared in the darkness. Whoosh! A wave of strong wind came from the back of Jian Wushuang as the space behind him seemed to distort and open before a black spear came flying towards him like an awakened dragon, along with an outburst of frightening power. Jian Wushuang slightly moved his body as the black spear flew past him and swept past the side of his clothes. However, the ancient witch waved her hand before slightly moving her body, which resulted in forming hundreds of her apparitions before all of them concurrently rushed towards Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch had meditated on both the dark and space-time law. Hence her dark law understanding was quite defined, while that of the space-time was just ordinary. She had come to the space-time palace to raise her insights towards space-time law. Whoosh! 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 The cold spears continuously pierced towards Jian Wushuang with shocking power, while Jian Wushuang fluttered his body freely like an erratic cloud. Be *starred, I dare you not to move. The ancient witch shouted softly. Jian Wushuang mocked. You are too slow. He did not make any moves, and only fluttered in the sky at his speed. This had already caused the ancient witch's attacks to fail at reaching him. The ancient witch failed to bump or even touch Jian Wushuang for a long period as Jian Wushuang evaded her attacks. This made the ancient witch extremely angry. At this moment, Jian Wushuang made a sudden move. He took the opportunity and rushed toward her when the ancient witch retracted her spears. He only used his finger as his sword, and a raw sword light directly hit the ancient witch's body without any obstruction. This attack was unable to hurt the ancient witch as she had defensive measures on top of wearing defensive armor underneath her clothes. However, she still turned pale. "You've lost." Jian Wushuang slowly spoke. The ancient witch slightly trembled and held her fists tightly with her nails already dug into her flesh. She had lost. She had really lost. She had completely lost without any grounds to struggle and fight back. There was a huge gap in their differences. Space-time law. This guy has an extremely high understanding of space-time law. The ancient witch looked upwards and stared at Jian Wushuang. She was not the only one. Her 3 other seniors were also staring at Jian Wushuang at this moment. All of them saw the battle. Jian Wushuang had only evaded the ancient witch's attacks with his speed from the beginning. The ancient witch was really strong with powerful means, with her spear movements speedy and extremely powerful. However, it did not matter how powerful her spear movements were, as it was useless as long as she could not touch her opponent. Jian Yi moved too fast. He easily defeated the ancient witch with his absolute speed in this fight. The Sacred Palace experts and disciples standing around the fighting area were also slightly stunned. He won. He won over one of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's heavenly pride. He moves too fast and has a high-level understanding of space-time law. No wonder he dared to proactively make a gamble. Turns out he's confident he'll win. Who knew there's a genius with such a high understanding of space-time law in our Sacred Palace? The Sacred Palace disciples were all sighing. They previously felt that Jian Wushuang was extremely arrogant when he proactively requested a gamble fight and made a bet of 100 divine elixir pills. However, the situation at that moment, Jian Wushuang had kicked everybody's asses with his actions. 100 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang looked at the ancient, which with a smile on his face while stretching his right hand out, the ancient which gritted her teeth, and was about to take those pills out and give Jian Wushuang, when, "Let's not be in a hurry." The voice of someone speaking was heard before the red-haired young man, who was one of the ancient witch's seniors, slowly walked forward. He arrived in front of the ancient witch and comforted her. "Junior, both victory and defeat are normal during battles, especially when Jian Yi has a higher peak Earth ultimate god realm compared to you. He still has great natural advantages, even though he did not use his peak Earth ultimate god's divine power. It's normal for you to lose, so there's no need to be caught up by this." The ancient witch slightly nodded. Although she was unable to resign over her failure, she should not be defeated after only losing twice to Jian Yi. Her name, which had mentioned a lot about her character and style of handling matters. The red-haired man looked towards Jian Wushuang after comforting the ancient witch. "You're Jian Yi? My name is Lung Xing, and am also a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Are you also interested in carrying out a gamble fight with me?" Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. "Of course, I cannot pretend it's nothing when I see my junior is being bullied as her senior brother," said Lung Xing. "We can carry out another gamble fight, but you need to give me the 100 divine elixir pills first," said Jian Wushuang directly. "I'm a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Do you think he'll refuse to give you some pills?" Lung Xing's facial expression darkened. That's difficult to say, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. Lung Xing was speechless and could only flip his hand to come up with some divine elixir pills. He gathered the pills alongside the ancient, which before passing 100 of them to Jian Wushuang. Not bad. Jian Wushuang smiled in satisfaction when he took over the 100 divine elixir pills before glancing at Lung Xing with a growing smile on his face. You are the senior brother of the ancient witch, and also a peak earth ultimate god. I'm sure you're much stronger than the ancient witch and richer. Why don't we increase our bet slightly for this fight to 200 divine elixir pills? 200 divine elixir pills. The corners of Lung Xing's mouth trembled uncontrollably. It was true that he was a heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and not to mention the fact that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was extremely rich. However, divine elixir pills were not like primordial stones that could be easily obtained. He could not come up with 200 pills even after adding up everything he had. All right, I agree. Lung Xing directly nodded. The ancient witch looked at him and softly said, Senior brother Lung Xing, Jian Yi is quite strong and has an extremely high understanding of space-time law. Apart from that, he easily defeated me without using his principal world during our fight just now. He showed divine power far stronger than his level when I was defeated by him. Hence you cannot look down at him. This gamble fight. Chapter 2670. Ravaged the ancient, which originally planned to advise Lung Xing so that he would not simply carry out a gamble fight with Jian Wushuang. She felt that Jian Wushuang's strength was slightly unpredictable on top of being too confident. He had something to rely on as he dared proactively raise a gamble fight with such huge bets even though he knew they were heavenly prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, Lung Xing waved his hand before she could finish speaking and said, Junior Sister Ancient, you seem to be looking down at me. Please don't forget that I'm one of the top 5 peak Earth ultimate gods in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Do you think this Jian Wushuang can be one of the top 5 peak Earth ultimate gods geniuses in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? The ancient witch was stunned and slightly frowned, but did not continue to speak. I agree to 200 divine elixir pills. Jian Yi, the both of us are peak Earth ultimate gods, so there's no need to reserve your divine power. Just show us all your skills, shouted Lung Xing as his body suddenly trembled. A total of 700 apparitions appeared at the same time. Lung Xing had quite a strong understanding of space-time law, even among the heaven ultimate god, as he could cultivate as many as 700 apparitions at the same time. It was no wonder he was so confident. Apart from his space-time law understanding, his principal world had also opened up to the size of 30,000 kilometers, with powers much stronger than the ancient witches. His weapon was the battle saber, which he handled in an extremely fast manner. The combat power he showed at that exact moment was extremely surprising. The surrounding Sacred Palace disciples looked at him in horror, as Lung Xing was only a peak Earth ultimate god, but his combat prowess was comparable to those primary-level heaven ultimate god in the eyes of those Sacred Palace disciples. Would Jian Yi be an opponent to Lung Xing, who had such horrifying power? Everybody was wondering at the bottom of their hearts, but what happened next exceeded their expectations. Jian Wushuang slightly took action after Lung Xing activated his combat power. He also activated his 800 apparitions, 100 more than Lung Xing, to appear at that moment. He also released his profound achievement Sword World, but he did not display his full strength. The Sword World power he displayed was less than 50%, but this 50% was enough to suppress Lung Xing's speed in his principal world. Apart from that, his Blood Mountain sword had appeared in his hand as he displayed his sword principle. He used the tactic of stopping speed with greater speed as he handled his sword faster than Lung Xing's saber-handling ways. In terms of divine power, Jian Wushuang's explosive divine power was stronger than Lung Xing's. Law, understanding, principal world, sword skill, saber skill, and divine power. Lung Xing was completely suppressed by Jian Wushuang in every aspect. Everything ended with Lung Xing being completely ravaged by Jian Wushuang without being able to fight back much. It was a one-sided complete ravage. Although Lung Xing tried all sorts of ways as though he had gone crazy, everything was useless when faced with overwhelming strength. The Sacred Palace disciples were slightly stunned when they saw that. They had never imagined a Sacred Palace disciple would be able to ravage a similarly leveled Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's heavenly pride to that extent. It was truly miserable. The facial expressions of those 3 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples who were standing at the battlefield's edge slightly darkened. They initially did not pay much attention to the Sacred Palace disciples, but one of them was completely ravaged by the other party in a blink of an eye. "I have already said that Jian Yi is extremely strong," said the ancient witch coldly. A while later, the completely one-sided battle and ravaged situation had finally ended. The person who won was naturally Jian Wushuang. As for Lung Xing, he was initially very irritable and extremely angry, but soon became extremely obedient after a round of being ravaged such that he even started to be frightened of Jian Wushuang. This was the first time he was ravaged by a similarly leveled peak Earth ultimate god. Even the other 4 peak Earth ultimate gods at the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion were not much stronger than him despite being positioned higher than him. It was impossible for them to so easily ravage him. However, Jian Wushuang managed to do so. It meant that Jian Wushuang would have been the first ranked among those peak Earth ultimate gods in their pavilion if he went to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. "You're Lung Xing, right? 200 divine elixir pills." Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze on Lung Xing with a smile on his face, but with his right hand already stretched out. The corners of Lung Xing's mouth slightly twitched. Although he was extremely unwilling, he still took a batch of pills and several special treasures of the equal value out from his interspatial ring. "There's only so little divine elixir pills." Jian Wushuang pursed his mouth. He was not interested in those special treasures, as he would only sell them at the star-picking pavilion the moment he got them. He wanted ready-made divine elixir pills, as the treasure's value would be hugely discounted if he exchanged them for those pills later on. Unfortunately, Lung Xing did not have so many pills on him, so Jian Wushuang could forcibly ask for it. Jian Wushuang focused his gaze at the remaining 2 heavenly prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion after defeating Lung Xing, the handsome teenager who was also at the peak-level Earth heavenly god could not help but secretly tremble when he felt Jian Wushuang's gaze. This handsome teenager dared not take action if even Lung Xing was ravaged by Jian Wushuang, as he was not as strong as Lung Xing. Jian Wushuang also did not pay much attention to him and turned his gaze at the final person. This crossed-armed person with an extremely cool facial expression on his face was the burly man called Wu Xian. "Brother, I wonder if you'd like to have a gamble fight with me?" Jian Wushuang asked with a smile on his face. Everyone present was startled with the look in their eyes that slowly changed into astonishment as he spoke. If the reason Jian Wushuang dared continuously fight both the ancient witch and Lung Xing was because of his extremely powerful abilities, everyone felt he had gone completely crazy at that moment. He was certainly crazy. He dared to challenge senior brother Wu Xian. The ancient witch was also startled. "He's not satisfied after continuously defeating me and junior sister ancient. Does he want to have a gamble battle with senior brother Wu Xian? Does he really think he's invincible?" Lung Xing also shouted slightly softly. The handsome teen also mumbled, Is he really crazy?" Wu Xian was completely different from them. The reason was not only from being more talented, but the crux laid within his current realm. Boom! A strong aura exploded from the burly man Wu Xin's body. This aura wave was extremely strong and suppressed everybody there, apart from Jian Wushuang and a small number of Sacred Palace experts. Everybody else slightly trembled under the aura's suppression. Heaven Ultimate God. Wu Xian was a true Heaven Ultimate God. He was also an extreme genius. Chapter 2671. Wu Xian, the strong wave of Heaven Ultimate God's divine power suppressed Jian Wushuang's body like a tsunami. The burly man called Wu Xin's cold staring toward Jian Wushuang, with both his eyes were like two rays of explosive lightning. Are you sure you want to challenge me? Definitely. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently and seemed extremely at ease under Wu Xin's suppressive aura. How much would you like to bet? Wu Xian asked. My bet just now with Lung Xing was already 200 divine elixir pills. You're a Heaven Ultimate God, so your bet needs to be higher. Let's agree on 500 divine elixir pills, said Jian Wushuang. All right, I agree. Wu Xian directly nodded. We maintain the fight on laws and principles, understanding while I'll take note to hold back my divine power. Let's begin. Wu Xian did not waste time after he finished speaking with his extremely cold voice as his body started moving. The same situation happened as a large number of apparitions appeared. These Dragon Phoenix Pavilion heavenly prides came to the Sacred Palace because of the space-time beast, as all of them had meditated on the space-time law. It was without a doubt that Wu Xian had the highest understanding among them in space-time law. The apparitions that concurrently appeared overwhelmingly blotted out the entire void and ground, as Wu Xian had conjured 1,000 apparitions at that moment. 1,000 apparitions were the limit for apparitions' cultivation. Achieving this step meant that Wu Xin's space-time law understanding had reached the peak of the first stage, with his next improvement being achieving the second stage, space-time strangulation. Such a level of understanding was definitely extremely strong among Heaven Ultimate Gods. Many peak Heaven Ultimate Gods were also unable to achieve the second stage space-time strangulation after all. You have quite a good understanding of space-time law. Jian Wushuang only smiled indifferently as 1,000 apparitions also appeared following a slight twitch of his body. A large number of apparitions filled the entire battlefield, as both of them were moving at high speeds and soon clashed head-to-head with each other. Clank! Loud, clanking sounds of metal on metal could be heard as the people surrounding the battlefield immediately looked towards the sound's origin, but only to see two strong divine powers fighting against each other before another loud, humming sound could be heard at another void not far from that location. An Earth Ultimate God's Sacred Palace disciple could not control himself and asked, "See, can you guys see where their true bodies are at?" I can't. I can only see these apparitions while following the sounds. I can't see them too. They are moving too fast. This is true speed. I've seen two primary level Heaven Ultimate Gods fighting, and their speeds were also extremely surprising. However, there's a huge difference between them and these two. Even if hundreds of work together, they'll only be easily killed by those two under such extreme speed. If this was a real battle, as peak Earth Ultimate Gods attacks won't be able to touch those two under such scary speed, in addition to having so many apparitions. The surrounding Sacred Palace disciples stood there in shock as they looked at Jian Wushuang and Wu Xian bumping into each other in the middle of the battlefield. However, they only saw them fighting unstoppably with nobody capable of seeing clearly their true body's location. Sounds of exclamation naturally could be heard expanding. Even the three heavenly prides of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion were also making noises as they saw the course of events before their eyes. Two figures were slowly walking over in the void, far away from the battlefield. Brother Sijun, I'm sorry for troubling you this time. A black-robed elder with eagle-like eyes was smiling softly. My Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples have met with some bottlenecks in their space-time law understanding, and the space-time beast in your sacred palace is quite intriguing. They must be able to learn something after meditating for 1 month in front of the space-time beast in your sacred palace. Haha, it's no trouble at all. Brother Ting, there's no need to be so polite with me. You've paid a certain price after all. Palace Keeper Sijun was also smiling. At this moment, continuous humming noises could be heard from the void in front of them. The black-robed elder and Palace Keeper Sijun were both surprised. I specifically asked your disciples from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to take action and teach my sacred palace disciples a lesson. However, their interaction should have long finished as so much time passed. Why are they still fighting until now? Palace Keeper Sijun was slightly surprised. Let's go over and have a look, said the black-robed elder with a smile. The duo immediately increased their speed and soon arrived at the void outside the space-time palace, only to notice the battle in front of them. Wu Xian actually took action. The black-robed elder squinted his eyes when he saw the battlefield scene. The person fighting with him is a peak Earth ultimate god. However, his speed isn't any weaker than Wu Xian, and is equal with Wu Xian in this fight. The black-robed elder asked, Palace Keeper Sijun, who's this young guy? He had no idea that Palace Keeper Sijun was slightly stunned at that moment. He definitely recognized the person fighting Wu Xian, and it was none other than Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang had been training in retreat, as per his knowledge. When did he come out? He knew slightly about Jian Wushuang's strength. He purposely requested those heavenly prides from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to teach the Sacred Palace disciples a lesson at that time, so that his disciples would understand the limits of their abilities on top of wearing down their inner ignorance and create awareness that there were stronger people out there in the world. However, he had not previously considered these Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples would end up fighting with Jian Wushuang. Palace Keeper Sijun replied upon hearing the black-robed elder's question. This guy is Jian Yi and had just become one of the Sacred Palace's disciples. He had been keeping a low profile ever since and had been training in seclusion. I wonder why he suddenly came out from his seclusion today and got involved in the fight against these Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's people. The black-robed elder praised. Jian Yi, this youth is quite good. Although he's just a peak Earth ultimate god, his space-time law understanding has reached the first stage's peak. He's as good as Wu Xian on top of being so brilliant in swordsmanship. Brother Sijun, who would have expected you to have such a strong genius in your sacred palace? Palace Keeper Sijun could only embarrassingly smile. He has a high understanding of space-time law, but is sadly only a peak Earth ultimate god. There's still a slight difference between him and Wu Xian. The black-robed elder smiled indifferently. Look, Wu Xian is starting to take things seriously. Palace Keeper Sijun immediately looked over. Sure enough, the duo who were fighting furiously on the battlefield distanced themselves from each other before Wu Xian took out a smaller and thinner golden-purple staff apart from the dark gold staff he initially held in his hand. This golden-purple staff had a very unique aura that was surrounded by a surging space-time law power. Chapter 2672. Another bet? That's the Evolving Sky Godly Staff. Palace Keeper Sijun squinted his eyes as he recognized the staff. There were all sorts of mystical weapons that suited various laws in the ancient god domain. The Hongjun golden sword that Jian Wushuang once controlled was a weapon suitable to be used with space-time law. The Evolving Sky Godly Staff Wu Xian presented at this moment was also suitable for space-time law and was as well known as the Hongjun golden sword. The evolving sky godly staff immediately changed into a ray of golden-purple light under Wu Xin's control as it traveled through the void toward Jian Wushuang. That ray of golden-purple light traveled extremely fast, but the most crucial point was its equally strong power. Jian Wushuang waved his Blood Mountain sword and collided with the golden-purple light twice, which forced his body to move slightly backwards after the collision. "You are losing," Wu Xian said with his cold voice as he stared at Jian Wushuang. He admitted that Jian Wushuang's law's perception was much stronger than himself. However, it was still within the manageable range. The golden-purple ray once again attacked Jian Wushuang with even more power than before. "This is interesting." Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently before also waving his hand. A total of 9 black-colored infernal crimson divine swords appeared at the void in front of him and quietly floated. "Go!" Those 9 infernal crimson divine swords turned into 9 huge black holes upon Jian Wushuang's finger-pointing before shockingly attacking the golden-purple ray. They met the golden-purple ray head-on within the blink of an eye and caused loud booming sounds. Clank, 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 clank. Several muffled, clunking noises were heard. Although the 9 infernal crimson divine swords had the number advantage, it was still repeatedly sent flying over by the golden-purple ray upon knocking into each other. It's useless. Although your 9 divine swords are quite powerful, their strength is too dispersed and not fast enough. Although I only have 1 Yantian godly staff, it's enough to entirely crush you, Wu Xian said. Really? A playful smile appeared on Jian Wushuang's face before he pointed his right hand again. "Swords combine." The black holes formed from the 9 infernal crimson divine swords immediately overlapped each other as a vast reincarnation passage appeared out of nowhere. At the end of the reincarnation passage, a black divine sword covered in infinite samsara strength abruptly traveled outward. This black divine sword had a sky-high aura and was extremely fast. It once again knocked into the golden-purple ray of light in the blink of an eye. Clank! It resulted in another huge explosive noise. However, the golden-purple light on the evolving sky godly staff had immediately turned dull upon that collision. The golden-purple light ray abruptly flew outward due to the collision, while the black divine sword once again traveled outward as though it was unaffected. Clank! Clank! After another 2 head-on collisions, the light on the evolving sky godly staff was almost gone as its power was reduced to almost nothing. How's this possible? Wu Xian was shocked. He had no idea that despite his evolving sky godly staff being strong, it was just a standard weapon generally found in the ancient god domain. However, the extremely strong transmigration sword formation shown by Jian Wushuang was created by Sword Lord Tong Xian. In addition, Jian Wushuang had an extremely high transmigration law understanding of having already reached the peak of the first stage, and was not lower than Wu Xin's space-time law understanding. Both were law understanding where the space-time law was faster, but its power fell short when being compared with transmigration law. The most important point was Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation mastery being higher with frequent usage than Wu Xin's evolving sky godly staff mastery. It was natural for Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation to easily crush Wu Xin's evolving sky godly staff with the combination of all those 3 points. Time for you to lose. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently before the black divine sword formed from the transmigration sword formation once again exploded outward and directly hit Wu Xin's divine body this time. Jian Wushuang naturally did not use any strength as the black divine sword did not even break Wu Xin's divine body defense. However, the results of this battle had been decided upon arriving at this point. He's lost. Senior brother Wu Xian lost. The three Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples stood there in disbelief. Wu Xian was one of the publicly recognized top geniuses in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion after all. His talents were sufficient for him to be in the top 10 among all those Dragon Phoenix Pavilion geniuses. In addition, his realm was one level higher than Jian Wushuang. How could Wu Xian still lose under such circumstances when both parties were competing in the understanding of laws and principles? Transmigration, sword formation. What Jian Yi just used should be the transmigration sword formation, right? The black-robed elder stared at Jian Wushuang with electrified eyes. Yes. Palace Keeper Xizhen nodded, as he also recognized it. Congratulations to you, Brother Xizhen. It's been some time since such a clever genius appeared in your sacred palace, said the black-robed elder. I'm just lucky, just lucky. Palace Keeper Xizhen could only laugh. Wu Xian gritted his teeth as he stared at Jian Wushuang somberly in the void in front of them. Transmigration law. Who knew you'll have such a high understanding of the transmigration law apart from your space-time law understanding that has reached the peak of the first stage? In addition, you have such a powerful sword formation. My loss in this battle isn't an injustice. Wu Xian was not a narrow-minded person. He admitted both his defeat and also his law understanding not being as good as Jian Wushuang, even though Jian Wushuang's cultivation realm was a whole level lower than himself. Race 500 divine elixir pills. Wu Xian flipped his hand and gave Jian Wushuang an interspatial ring. Jian Wushuang scanned the ring after receiving it as a calculative look flashed through his eyes. He only received less than 200 divine elixir pills. Although he made bets and won against the ancient witch and Lung Xing during the previous two battles, he only received 300 pieces of divine elixir pills, as the rest were replaced with precious items of the same value. However, the 500 divine elixir pills he received from Wu Xian were ready-made divine elixir pills, as Wu Xian did not use any same-valued precious items to replace them. This made Jian Wushuang quite happy. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples are really rich, mumbled Jian Wushuang, and suddenly rolled his eyes as an idea emerged from the bottom of his heart. Your name is Wu Xian, right? Jian Wushuang once again looked towards Wu Xian. Yes. Wu Xian nodded. You have an extremely high understanding of the law and are really talented. You must be one of the top geniuses in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. You must be unreconciled with your loss today, as we did only competed on laws and principles understanding without showing any of our other skills after all. Why don't we make another bet? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. Another bet. Wu Xian turned and stared at Jian Wushuang. The people around them also looked at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. Chapter 2673. All-out Jian Wushuang had fought against 3 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples in a row since the beginning of the gamble fight, and even won against his strongest opponent, Wu Xian. He wants to fight again. Jian Yi, I admit you're a talented genius, but don't take it too far. Wu Xian coldly eyed Jian Wushuang. Ha! Let's hear how well go about this gamble fight first, suggested Jian Wushuang with a faint smile. Though I've defeated you in the earlier fight, we were fighting based on the perception of laws and principles only while you didn't even get the chance to display your true strength. Let's change the rules this time, where both of us can make our best effort without any scruples in this battle. You can fully display your divine power and various techniques. How about that? Are you asking me to do my best? Wu Xin's eyes narrowed. He had confidence in his status and abilities as Heaven Ultimate God, after all. Although Jian Wushuang earlier defeated him, he had been maintaining his divine power at the peak Earth Ultimate God level, while not using his many methods and techniques purely competing based on the perception of laws. If he was able to go all out without restrictions, how many divine elixir pills would you like to bet on in this battle? Wu Xian asked. We bet on 500 divine elixir pills just now. So we have to do at least 1,000 divine elixir pills this time, said Jian Wushuang in a deep voice before stretching out a finger. 1,000 divine elixir pills. He actually wanted to bet more, but he was worried betting too many divine elixir pills would scare Wu Xian off and made him reluctant to fight. Wu Xin's face sank slightly when he heard the 1,000 divine elixir pills bet and said, I can't fork out 1,000 divine elixir pills. He was telling the truth, as he had lost 500 divine elixir pills, which was all he had. It was impossible for him to further take out 1,000 divine elixir pills. However, Wu Xian, go ahead and agree with him, said a gentle voice. The black-robed old man approached alongside Palace Keeper Xizhen. Elder Teng, Wu Xian, ancient witch, and Lung Xing immediately made obeisance respectfully. Palace Keeper Xizhen. The many expert disciples of the sacred palace also made obeisance to the Palace Keeper Xizhen. 8,000 divine elixir pills is nothing for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. You just have to do your best, said the black-robed old man. Yes, Wu Xian nodded and immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. We're fine with 1,000 divine elixir pills. Let's fight. Sure, I'm ready. Jian Wushuang beckoned to Wu Xian. Anger was brewing in Wu Xin's eyes as his unbridled, heavenly ultimate god divine power finally erupted. His evolving sky godly staff, which had gone dim after colliding several times with Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation, lit up once again with much stronger power and brightness than before. Wu Xin's divine body also began to change at the same time. He was originally the size of a normal human, but had very quickly grown and soared to nearly 5 yards tall, while his skin and hair had completely turned purple, such that even his pupils were dazzling in a strange purply luster. An inexhaustible purply divine power surrounded him, and he looked like a tall purple demon deity. This is one of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's 6 secret techniques, Purple Blood Demon Deity. Based on Wu Xin's divine power breath, he has practiced it up to the Secret Techniques 3rd volume. Amazing! Palace Keeper Xizhen was admiring the Purple Blood Demon Deity that Wu Xian formed. Palace Keeper Xizhen had seen some of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's top secret techniques. An ordinary primary-level heaven ultimate god was usually able to practice up to the 2nd volume of the Purple Blood Demon Deity secret technique, but Wu Xian had made it to the 3rd volume, which only spoke volumes of his extraordinary talent. He was originally a primary-level heaven ultimate god with a solid foundation and extremely powerful divine power. His combat prowess is comparable to a high-level heaven ultimate god, now that he has turned into a purple blood demon deity, which skyrocketed his overall strength on top of coupling with his perception of space-time law and evolving sky godly staff. Palace Keeper Xizhen said in a low voice, Wu Xian was indeed emanating a powerful divine power at that instance, which obviously exceeded the powers of a primary-level heaven ultimate god. Moreover, Wu Xin had also fought against a high-level heaven ultimate god before. Although he was defeated in that battle, the fight that had carried on for a long time only further proved his fighting capabilities against high-level heaven ultimate gods. He was not shocked or frightened by the 1,000 divine elixir pills that Jian Wushuang bet upon having such powerful strength as his backing. Jian Yi, you're so full of yourself. Wuxin's purple eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Jian Wushuang and spoke with a loud voice. Maybe Jian Wushuang merely smiled faintly with a calm expression. Humph! Wu Xian did not waste more time talking as he snorted and fiercely charged forward. Buzz! There were almost 1,000 apparitions in action once again. the 5-yard-tall purple blood demon deity apparition flooded all corners of the battlefield, while the evolving sky godly staff turned into a stream of purply golden fleeting light in the battlefield center with a long tail dragging its back whilst it fiercely launched at Jian Wushuang. Wu Xian had previously only used the power of a peak earth ultimate god to perform the same method. The purple golden fleeting light's penetrating power was several folds stronger than before after he used much stronger divine power to perform the same technique. Too strong. This power is way too strong. I think such terrifying power is on par with a high-level heaven ultimate god's power. How could Jian Yi parry off the attack? He'll lose for sure. Definitely. I don't even know why Jian Yi is so courageous. How dare Jian Yi challenge Wu Xian, who is giving his all in the fight? He even bet 1,000 divine elixir pills. Many experts from the Sacred Palace who gathered around secretly marveled at Wu Xin's skill. All of them felt an irresistible power from the purply gold fleeting light Wu Xian displayed. Its power was extremely strong. However, Jian Wushuang merely smiled faintly when he looked at the densely packed purple blood demon deity apparitions before him and the purply gold fleeting light that came swooping down at him. With a wave of his hand, space-time strangulation. Buzz. The world was shaken up. A huge strangling force instantly exploded and engulfed the entire battlefield. The vigorous strangling force violently strangled everything within its reach and instantly strangulated the almost 1,000 purple blood demon deity apparitions on the battlefield before all of them went poof and disappeared. The battlefield was finally left with Wu Xian, who stood there in awe. Jian Wushuang then made another move. He did not use the Transmigration Sword formation, but just very casually wielded his own Blood Mountain sword without adding in any complicated sword techniques. Nonetheless, the sword movement contained a part of divine power coming from Jian Wushuang, and also 2 space-time blades. Chapter 2674. 1. Space-time blade technique was a secret technique that one could master after reaching the second stage, space-time law. It was an extremely powerful technique. Theoretically, a single space-time blade was enough to easily kill a primary-level heaven ultimate god. Jian Wushuang made a breakthrough in his perception of space-time law and mastered his first space-time blade 9 years ago. In the following 9 years, he spent time cultivating the finger-pointing heavenly technique while also improving in his space-time law perception, which somehow allowed him to display his second space-time blade during that period. His ordinary sword movement became extremely terrifying when 2 space-time blades had been condensed in his sword. Clang! There was a loud noise, and soon the purple golden fleeting light that was madly charging forward immediately went dim, such that even the evolving sky godly staff was thrown off. Jian Wushuang then did a simple body jerk. It was just a simple jerk without any apparition discharged, but his figure teleported across and appeared next to Wu Xian. Why is it so fast? Wu Xian looked astonished without even having time to react. Jian Wushuang's longsword struck. Snap! Wu Xian was sent flying away, and the fight was over even though he was uninjured. Thank you. Jian Wushuang withdrew his Blood Mountain sword and smiled faintly. Wu Xian, on the other hand, did not manage to react at all. The people that were watching their fight were shocked and became speechless. They were shocked when they saw Wu Xin's real strength, with thoughts that Wu Xin's strength was too strong and Jian Wushuang probably had no chance of winning at all. They were even more shocked when Wu Xian was defeated in the blink of an eye. He was defeated too fast. He was able to fight head-on with Jian Wushuang for a long time when he was relying on his law's perception and principles understanding. Why would he be defeated in such a jiffy when he did his best? What could that possibly reflect? This Jian Yi, a peak Earth ultimate god, unexpectedly defeated a not ordinary primary level heaven ultimate god, but the pride of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, whose combat prowess was estimated to be comparable with high-level heaven ultimate gods. That's so unbelievable. Jian E. I feel like I've heard of this name before. Oh, I've recalled. A heaven ultimate god expert from Sacred Palace suddenly exclaimed in horror. It's him. He's the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, Jian E. He managed to resist attacks from 3 primary-level heaven ultimate gods while having the cultivation base of a peak Earth ultimate god decades ago, who not only didn't lose miserably, but also made both Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect offer a reward of 100 million primordial stones to capture him. Yes, it's him. There was an uproar from the battlefield following Jian Wushuang's identity announcement by the Heaven Ultimate God, the black-robed old man from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Elderton was closely staring at Jian Wushuang from the surrounding void, dumbfounded. It's Space-Time Blade. It turns out to be the Space-Time Blade. Jian E. Palace Keeper Sijun also stared at Jian Wushuang in awe. They were startled by the technique that Jian Wushuang displayed. The Space-Time Blade was a secret technique that one could master only after reaching the second stage, Space-Time Law. Many peak heaven ultimate gods had never reached the space-time strangulation of the second stage Space-Time Law, yet a peak Earth ultimate god, such as Jian E, managed to do it. He isn't only well-versed in space-time law, but he has also reached the second stage. His divine power also isn't any weaker than an average primary-level heaven ultimate god. The black-robed old man's expression looked cold. This kid, his strength is far above Wu Xin, but was hiding his true potential from the beginning and gradually set his traps, allowing Wu Xin to fall victim in his plan to get a large number of divine elixir pills from Wu Xin. What a cunning brat! Even the black-robed old man, Elder Tung, who had reached the grand ultimate god level, thought Jian Wushuang was cunning. He had agreed with the 1,000 divine elixir pills, that because he never thought Jian Wushuang could beat Wu Xin. As a result, they fell into Jian Wushuang's trap and were tricked into giving away so many divine elixir pills. Although he's cunning, it's undeniable he's indeed very powerful. It's unbelievable that a peak Earth ultimate god like him can reach this level of strength. This kid is an exceptional genius and much better than most of the experts from our Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. I'm afraid only one person from our Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can be his match, murmured the black-robed old man. Jian Wushuang had already stretched out his palm in the void up front. Now, hand over 1,000 divine elixir pills. Wu Xin shuddered as he turned and searched for the black-robed old man's gaze. The black-robed old man frowned and slowly walked up. "Young man, are you Jian E?" The black-robed old man studied Jian Wushuang. "Yes." Jian Wushuang nodded and behaved humbly around the grand ultimate god. The black-robed old man asked, "You're indeed very powerful. Are you interested in joining my Dragon Phoenix Pavilion?" Palace Keeper Sijun, who was next to him, grunted his dissatisfaction when he heard that. "Brother Ting, aren't you a bit too much? It's so hard to finally have such a genius in my sacred palace, and you still want to take him away?" "Haha, I just casually asked. Palace Keeper Sijun, don't be angry just yet. This young man here may not be willing." The black-robed old man smiled. "I'm really not very interested in joining the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, so I'd better stay in the sacred palace," replied Jian Wushuang conveniently. The black-robed old man's face stiffened and could only smile awkwardly at the situation. "Brother Ting, you'll have to give away the divine elixir pills. 1,000 divine elixir pills are nothing but a drop of water in the bucket for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion," said Palace Keeper Sijun. "Of course." The black-robed old man smiled before taking out an interspatial ring and handed it to Jian Wushuang. Little guy, these are the 1,000 divine elixir pills you've just won. 1,000 divine elixir pills are nothing to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Perhaps you can reconsider it carefully. You'll have everything you need if you join the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. You can have as many resources as you need. Brother Tung. Palace Keeper Sijun's face sank and was getting a little annoyed. Haha, all right. The black-robed old man waved his hand again. The black-robed old man then led Wu Xian into the space-time palace, whilst Jian Wushuang happily left upon receiving his divine elixir pills. At the space-time palace. Elder Tung, I'm useless. I'm sorry to have let you down. Wu Xian blamed himself. This matter isn't your fault, and you're not useless. You met an extraordinary opponent. He's genuinely an exceptional genius, and perhaps only one person in the entire 9 realms of Golden Crow could defeat him, said the black-robed old man. You mean Junior Sister Lung? Wu Xian was startled. It's her, but it's a pity your Junior Sister Lung is too talented. She's not someone my Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can house. The black-robe old man secretly sighed. Chapter 2675. Muddy the Waters, Jian Wushuang stood in the sacred palace's void with a mischievous smile on his face while holding an interspatial ring in his hand. I went to the space-time palace to see if I can gain something, but didn't expect to meet those people from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. They're so good that they send me so many divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang had decided to challenge the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples to a gamble fight on a whim, but the outcome was clear. What a joke! Although he was only a peak Earth Ultimate God, his combat power was definitely at the peak Heaven Ultimate God level. How can he possibly lose a gamble fight with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples? Unfortunately, these 1,800 divine elixir pills are still not enough to help me to make a breakthrough from a peak Earth Ultimate God to Heaven Ultimate God, mumbled Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang had absorbed and refined more than 1,200 divine elixir pills to make a breakthrough from high-level Earth Ultimate God to peak Earth Ultimate God. Besides that, he had also used the divine power he accumulated for decades. Therefore, he would need much more divine power to make a breakthrough from peak Earth Ultimate God to Heaven Ultimate God. The divine elixir pills Jian Wushuang had accumulated were a far cry from enough, as he estimated that he probably needed 5,000 to 6,000 divine elixir pills. I won't be able to make a next-level breakthrough anyway, so I don't need to absorb and refine these divine elixir pills in a hurry. Perhaps I can use it for some other purposes later. Jian Wushuang kept the interspatial ring, but his gazes gradually became sharper. My strength should have reached the peak now. It's almost impossible to make any large progress in a short period, so it's useless for me to stay in the sacred palace. I should start my next plan. Jian Wushuang left the sacred palace on the same day. In a hidden secret chamber, Jian Wushuang had once again disguised himself as Su Han and used the black stone to cover up his real divine power breath in his body. He was originally only a peak Earth Ultimate God, but his divine power had already reached the high-level Heaven Ultimate God level. He was carefully looking at a document with detailed information in his hand. It was the information of various powerful sects in the Danyang continent. Danyang continent was the core of the Danyang Holy Domain where experts gathered. The activities within Danyang continent were complicated as there were countless sects, forces, and clans involved regardless of their size. The top 5 forces are the Crimson Stone Fort, Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and the Dongfang clan. Jian Wushuang had seen information about the 5 forces before, so he naturally did not need to read further. He was looking at the information of the first-rate, second-rate, and even third-rate forces in the Danyang continent. Those forces must not be trifled with, since they were able to occupy a place within Danyang continent whereby grand ultimate gods were respected, heaven ultimate gods were plentiful, and earth ultimate gods everywhere. Take those first-rated forces as an example. There were as many as 12 first-rated forces on the Danyang continent, and each of those forces had extraordinary strength. At the very least, they had at least 2 to 3 grand ultimate gods and many experts under their leadership. Any one of those first-rated forces was not weaker than a small faction within Crimson Stone Fort. The second-rated forces were able to secure a foothold within Danyang continent from having grand ultimate gods and a lot of heaven ultimate gods, with quite a few peak heaven ultimate gods, some as many as 10. The third-rated forces were much weaker. The weaker ones generally had 1 or 2 grand ultimate gods in charge, and up to as many as 20 to 30 heaven ultimate gods under their command. Moving down below was the much weaker but larger number of third-rated forces. They could be destroyed very quickly. There are 5 top forces and 12 first-rated forces, with many second-rated and third-rated forces. The Danyang continent has no less than a few hundreds of forces and sects if I add them all up together. Jian Wushuang pondered. The Danyang continent is huge, with matters looking good when the Crimson Stone Fort had absolute power during his tenure, but it's now equivalent to a big pie that everyone is trying to get a share. Yet all hell did not break loose. I guess it must be the 5 top forces that kept matters in check, right? Jian Wushuang had studied the situation in Danyang continent for a long time. The current Danyang continent was indeed very peaceful. Contention between the forces was inevitable, but fights between various forces to rake in profit were scarce. The Danyang continent managed to establish such a balance because of the top 5 forces' deterrence effect. Jian Wushuang planned to destroy the balance. The reason Crimson Stone Fort is falling apart is due to their internal disputes being too chaotic, with 7 factions frantically competing within a single entity. They'll be surprised if Crimson Stone Fort remained strong despite all that. The top 4 forces, namely the Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan, are all sitting back and relaxing while waiting to reap easy benefits. They are waiting for Crimson Stone Fort to wither away before striking and destroying the Crimson Stone Fort when the opportunity arises. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. They are currently living so comfortably. I can't let these top forces stay at ease, keep accumulating their power, and get stronger if I want to help Yin Sewer. It'll have to muddy the waters and make things chaotic for the entire Danyang continent, as Crimson Stone Fort cannot be the only force in chaos. The more chaotic, the better. Only when the entire Danyang continent is completely messed up will the 4 top forces, Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan be pressured. They have their attention divided, which will relieve some stress off Yin Sewer. Jian Wushuang thought carefully. He had to find ways to instigate competition between various forces to muddy the waters in Danyang continent. He needed manpower and authority to do so, as he could not do it alone. In other words, he needed to be in control of a powerful force. It was too late for him to build up step by step, as he had to take shortcuts and exercise absolute strength to forcefully subdue one of those forces. That was why he was carefully looking at the information of each force and sect, seeking a suitable target. The easy ones are those who aren't influential. I can easily subdue 1 or 2 of those forces with my strength, but they usually have weak foundations and very few experts. Chapter 2676. Dragon Divine Sect. Many of those mediocre forces were randomly formed by a few heaven ultimate gods. However, they did not have foundations or territory. Hence, Jian Wushuang felt it was pointless to bring those forces under his control. He would like to target the third-rated forces, or above at the very least. However, the third-rated forces in Danyang Continent were not weak either, as any of them had one or two grand ultimate gods in charge with a bunch of high-level and primary-level heaven ultimate gods under their command. It was not going to be easy for Jian Wushuang to work on them. He had to comb through the force's information he had on hand in search of a suitable target. A name popped up after some thorough research. Dragon Divine Gang? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. Dragon Divine Gang was obviously a gang from its name. There were a few like them in Danyang Continent. However, the reason Jian Wushuang shortlisted the Dragon Divine Gang was not only because it was relatively weak among the many third-rated forces, but most importantly the only leader in the Dragon Divine Gang who reached the peak ultimate god level fought with someone not long ago and was beheaded on the spot by his opponent. The Dragon Divine Gang was in a frenzy without a leader. Hence, it was a good time for Jian Wushuang to step in and gain control. The Dragon Divine Gang's foundation isn't weak and at least has occupied a city in Danyang Continent, murmured Jian Wushuang, quite satisfied with the Dragon Divine Gang. They had a foundation and base. Although they were very weak, they seemed to have the complete package with also a substantial amount of heaven ultimate gods in Dragon Divine Gang. Let's go and check it out. Jian Wushuang put away the information and headed toward the city occupied by the Dragon Divine Gang. The city was called Dragon City. The Dragon Divine Gang's lair was in the center of Dragon City. A huge black castle made of blood gems could be seen with its surface covered with various unusual beast patterns. There was also a black dragon sculpture kept in the castle's middle while circling it with its head slightly raised just above the black castle. The facade made the black castle look quite majestic. This place looks quite imposing. Jian Wushuang stood above the void and looked down at the black castle below before taking action, and went straight into the castle without bothering the castle guards. At that instance, nearly 30 figures were gathered in a magnificent hall in the deepest part of the black castle. Those figures were emanating a tyrannical divine power breath at the level of heaven ultimate god. Most of them were primary level heaven ultimate gods, with 5 high-level heaven ultimate gods among the group of 30. That was the entire Dragon Divine Gang heaven ultimate gods level strength. They used to have a leader at the peak heaven ultimate god, but unfortunately was beheaded not long ago. Everyone, a graceful red-clothed woman, stood up and glanced at the people around her before slowly saying, "We're 3 days away from the 1-month deadline given to us by the Purple Beast Alliance. I'm uncertain if all of you have thought about it. Are we going to fight or surrender?" The expressions of the many heaven ultimate gods present turned a bit ugly when they heard the woman. "Let's just surrender." A purple-haired middle-aged man, one of the 5 high-level heaven ultimate gods present, stood up. "Our current strength isn't a match for the Purple Beast Alliance ever since our sect master was killed. The Purple Beast Alliance master alone is enough to slaughter all of us. We won't end well if we're still stubborn under such circumstances. Yes, the Purple Beast Alliance master could have wiped us all out, but choose not to. He instead gave us a month to consider. I think he's already really good to us. We're just being ignorant if we don't surrender. Let's just surrender. Our current strength will not be able to resist the attack from the Purple Beast Alliance. We'll all die if the battle continues. I also agree that we should surrender." Many people immediately agreed with the purple-haired, middle-aged man. The Dragon Divine Gang was in a dire situation and thought their best option was to surrender. However, humph! A cold grunt sounded, without warning, came from a bald old man called Long Shan, who was and had always been the recently deceased Dragon Divine Gang master's most loyal servant. A bunch of useless scum. Long Shan stood up and cursed. "Long Shan, what did you say?" The purple-haired, middle-aged man's face turned sullen. Both of them were high-level heaven ultimate gods. The purple-haired middle-aged man might watch out how he behaved around Longshan when the sect master was still alive. However, he no longer showed even the slightest respect for Longshan at that moment. Was I wrong? Longshan sounded cold. Sect master was not bad to you, was he? 90% of the various annual benefits we got from Dragon City were distributed to every one of us here, and he only kept 10% to himself. He had also tried his best to help all of you here to get whatever you wanted so that you could focus on improving your strength. The sect master has just been killed by the Purple Beast Alliance master not long ago, but all of you are giving up on avenging him and surrender at the feet of the Purple Beast Alliance. What are you if all of you aren't some useless scum? Longshan, you're not entirely right. The graceful red-clothed woman frowned and said, "Of course, we want to avenge our sect master, but you have realized our current situation. How on earth can we fight against the Purple Beast Alliance based on our current strength? We're just committing suicide if we act rashly and carry on with the fight." That's right. Longshan, we won't stop if you're loyal to the sect master and want to go crazy with revenge, but don't bring all of us down together with you. The purple-haired, middle-aged man bellowed in a low voice. Longshan was anxious, but he did not know what to say. A figure suddenly appeared in the hall out of thin air, without any signs. "It's quite lively here." A hearty laugh echoed in the hall as soon as the person appeared. Many dragon divine gangs, heaven ultimate gods, in the hall were shocked and turned to look at Jian Wushuang one after another. "Who are you? How dare you break into our dragon divine gang's lair?" The purple-haired middle-aged man stared at Jian Wushuang with seemingly angry, electrified eyes. A high-level heaven ultimate god. The graceful red-clothed woman squinted slightly before softly said, "Are you from the Purple Beast Alliance?" "Purple Beast Alliance? No, I'm not." Jian Wushuang smiled, slightly before swiftly moving his figure, and then sat down on the hall's main seat, the seat which was used to be occupied by the Dragon Divine Gang Master. A domineering voice also suddenly resounded after he sat down. "My name is Su Han. I'll be the new leader of the Dragon Divine Gang from today onwards. I wonder if any one of you disagree?" Chapter 2677. No chance to survive even though surrendered. I'll be the new leader of the Dragon Divine Gang from today. I wonder if any of you disagree? Jian Wushuang's voice rang in the ears of everyone present, making all the Dragon Divine Gang's heaven ultimate gods astonished. A hint of anger rose from the bottom of their hearts after a brief moment of stupor. It was not surprising they were agitated by a stranger who came out of nowhere and broke into the hall before claiming to be their new Dragon Divine Gang Master. They would feel better if the person was a peak heaven ultimate god, but Su-Han, who plunged into the gang leader's seat, was only emanating the aura of a high-level heaven ultimate god. Did that person, who was just a high-level heaven ultimate god, want to be their leader? What a joke. Your Excellency is too full of yourself. Although the Dragon Divine Gang is just an ordinary third-rate sect, not anyone can just barge in and bully us, said the graceful red-clothed woman in a deep voice. The purple-haired middle-aged man shouted in a very low voice. "Humph, you're just a high-level heaven ultimate god, while we still have 5 high-level heaven ultimate god here. You won't make it into the list even if we were to vote for a new leader. Get lost." The others were also glaring fiercely at Jian Wushuang. "It seems that all of you are not willing. If that's the case," Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently and just cracked a smile. Buzz. He discharged an earth-shaking sword intent before completely displaying his 10,000 miles sword world. The terrifying sword world oppressed the audience and shocked all of them. There were nearly 30 people present, with all of them being at the level of a heaven ultimate god. yet their expressions changed drastically under the Sword World's shock and oppression. Its principal world. What a terrifying principal world. It's only a profound realm, but gives me the feeling that it's no less than a complete principal world realm. Oops, the deterrent effect of this principal world is so strong that it has greatly restricted my strength. Is Suhan going to attack us? All the Heaven Ultimate Gods were frightened and were ready to take action. Jian Wushuang made a move under their gaze. Buzz. His figure disappeared out of thin air and reappeared next to the purple-haired middle-aged man as though he teleported. This speed, the purple-haired middle-aged man's eyes went wide. He was a dignified and honorable high-level Heaven Ultimate God, yet incapable of reacting to Jian Wushuang's terrifying speed. Jian Wushuang casually tapped his sword against the purple-haired middle-aged man's divine body before his figure became blurry and faded away again. Jian Wushuang's phantom-like body hurtled around the hall as he appeared and disappeared next to all the Heaven Ultimate Gods like a flickering star. Those Heaven Ultimate Gods failed to capture Jian Wushuang or organize any attacking strategy. Clang, 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 clang. There was a series of low grunting sounds when Jian Wushuang's Blood Mountain sword tapped on all the Heaven Ultimate Gods. However, Jian Wushuang did not use his divine power. He just wanted to make them tremble. Jian Wushuang was back in the main seat again, after a while, with his Blood Mountain sword sheathed as the sword world that flooded the hall slowly vanished. Jian Wushuang wore a faint smile and commented, "Am I qualified to be your leader now?" The hall fell silent. Almost 30 Heaven Ultimate Gods were staring at Jian Wushuang in horror. It was too fast. Jian Wushuang was too fast. They were incapable of reacting in time. In that very short time, Jian Wushuang used the body of his longsword to tap on each of them once. They would have died in that short time if Jian Wushuang used his sword's edge to cut their heads instead of the flat side. Too strong. It was too fast. He can kill us like killing chickens with this terrifying speed. Not only the primary level Heaven Ultimate Gods, but even the high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods won't be spared. He's only a high-level Heaven Ultimate God. How can his speed possibly be so fast? It's space-time strangulation. His perception of the space-time law must have reached the second stage, space-time strangulation. Otherwise, he won't be so fast. In addition, he's assisted from the great shocking effect of his sword world. Although he looked like just a high-level Heaven Ultimate God, he's more terrifying than a genuine Peak Heaven Ultimate God. It's not easy for a Peak Heaven Ultimate God to kill us, but he can easily kill us. The Dragon Divine Gang Heaven Ultimate God looked at Jian Wushuang in awe. Experts were highly respected in the world. It was the same in Dragon Divine Gang. They initially thought just a high-level Heaven Ultimate God, such as Jian Wushuang, was not qualified to be their leader, but no one dared to think as such at that moment. Surrender or die. Choose for yourself. Jian Wushuang spoke again with his cold voice at that moment as a faint killing intent filled the hall. The Dragon Divine Gang's high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods shuddered. Longshan is pleased to meet the gang leader. Longshan, the bald old man, was the first to bow down to Jian Wushuang and surrendered to Jian Wushuang. This old thing, didn't he insist we should fight the Purple Beast Alliance Master just now? The graceful red-clothed woman and the purple-haired middle-aged man were both irritated. They did not know that Longshan was not courageous, but only loyal to the deceased Dragon Divine Gang Master, and wanted to avenge his leader, who was killed by the Purple Beast Alliance Master. He was, of course, not willing to surrender. However, Longshan chose to surrender to Jian Wushuang without hesitation because Jian Wushuang had nothing to do with the Purple Beast Alliance on top of being incredibly powerful. Those who don't surrender, are you seeking death? Jian Wushuang's cold eyes glanced at the graceful red-clothed woman and the purple-haired middle-aged man. Master Su Han. The graceful red-clothed woman took a deep breath and solemnly said, "Dragon Divine Gang has always respected the strong. Anyone powerful could be the leader. Master, you are indeed qualified to be our leader based on your strength. However, do you know of the Dragon Divine Gang's current situation? Your current situation? Tell me about it." Jian Wushuang looked down. Our gang leader was beheaded by the Purple Beast Alliance Master, who gave us a 1-month deadline to submit to them. Otherwise, hell kill all of us as he wants to wipe the Dragon Divine Gang out. The graceful red-clothed woman did not continue her words. So that's the situation. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. It's easy. I'll handle the Purple Beast Alliance and dismiss them when they are here. Chapter 2678, Purple Beast Alliance, dismiss them. The Heaven Ultimate Gods from the Dragon Divine Gang stood gazing at each other. We have already planned on yielding to the Purple Beast Alliance. Our Dragon Divine Gang will naturally honor you as our leader if you manage to resolve the Purple Beast Alliance, said the graceful red-clothed woman. The purple-haired middle-aged man, and the rest standing beside them also nodded, having the same thoughts as the graceful red-clothed woman. How much time is left from the due date the Purple Beast Alliance gave you? Jian Wushuang asked. We still have 3 days. A huge group of masters from the Purple Beast Alliance will arrive after 3 days, if I'm not mistaken. The Purple Beast Alliance master will also be here in person, said the graceful red-clothed woman. It'll come again 3 days later if that's the case. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently and immediately left with his apparitions. A racket immediately started in the meeting hall after Jian Wushuang left. Everybody, let's discuss this. Can this person really get rid of the Purple Beast Alliance 3 days later? The Heaven Ultimate Gods started discussing amongst themselves. Dong Shui, what do you think? The purple-haired middle-aged man looked at the graceful red-clothed lady. I have no idea. The graceful red-clothed lady shook her head. Although this Su Han is only a high-level Heaven Ultimate God, all of you've seen his strength displayed to the extent we're unable to resist his attacks at all. He's too fast, and it's very simple for him to kill us. He definitely can go up against an ordinary peak Heaven Ultimate Gods with his speed. However, all of you know the Purple Beast Alliance Master's strength. Not only is he a true peak Heaven Ultimate God, but he's also very powerful such that our previous gang master died in his hands. Su Han won't have a high possibility of winning if he goes against the Purple Beast Alliance Master, but he'd at least be qualified to fight him. Aren't you just wasting your breath? The purple-haired middle-aged man rolled his eyes. Ha ha. I cannot judge if this Su Han can really defeat the Purple Beast Alliance Master and make the Alliance leave. However, I'm sure of one matter. It's something between him and the Purple Beast Alliance while the Dragon Divine Gang retains its middle ground. It has nothing to do with us if he's really defeated or died in the hands of the Purple Beast Alliance Master. We only need to surrender to the Purple Beast Alliance after everything ends. We'll only need to surrender to him if he's really strong and can make the Purple Beast Alliance leave with his power. Our Dragon Divine Gang won't suffer any losses no matter the outcome, said the graceful red-clothed woman called Dong Shui. That's true. All the Heaven Ultimate Gods around her nodded in agreement. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The experts from Purple Beast Alliance really came attacking them once their time was up. The Purple Beast Alliance was much stronger than the Dragon Divine Gang, with almost 40 Heaven Ultimate Gods when it came to overall strength. The Purple Beast Alliance had gone all out at that moment. The Purple Beast Alliance Master had personally led around 40 Heaven Ultimate Gods, along with many Peak Earth Ultimate Gods, and arrived at the Void on top of Dragon City. More than 100 densely packed figures were standing in the void. The Purple Beast Alliance Master was a more than 2 meters tall, burly man with purple-colored armor. He was casually sitting on a huge, purple-colored throne while engrossingly looking at the black fortress underneath him. A petite old man asked, "Alliance Master, 1 month has gone by, and there's still no news from the Dragon Divine Gang. It looks like they don't plan to surrender. Shall we directly take action?" "There's no hurry." The Alliance Master waved his hand. "This Dragon Divine Gang is a third-rated clan. Although I've killed their gang leader, they still have many heaven ultimate gods under their control. It'll be a waste if we kill all these heaven ultimate gods. We'd be able to include them into our Purple Beast Alliance if they proactively surrender and therefore once again increase our overall strength. Our Purple Beast Alliance will be considered extremely strong among the third-rated clans in the Danyang continent by then. How about this? Let's give them another hour. We shall directly take action and wipe them out if they still aren't making any moves within the next hour." "Noted." The petite old man nodded before opening his mouth and spoke in an austere manner. "Those from the Dragon Divine Gang, your 1-month time limit is up. Let us know if you choose to surrender or we'll wipe you out. My Alliance Master has given his orders to grant you another hour. Our Alliance will take action and wipe out your Dragon Divine Gang if you don't respond after the hour." The austere voice which came from the Heaven Ultimate God's mouth echoed mightily throughout the entire Dragon City. Many Dragon Divine Gang experts gathered in a castle surrounded by the huge dragon located in the center of Dragon City. Each of them had a serious expression on their faces after hearing that voice. "We only have 1 hour left. What should we do?" The purple-haired, middle-aged man was extremely worried. "Don't panic. Let's see if Suhan will take action. We can just surrender in the end if he doesn't," said the graceful red-clothed woman, Dong Shui. The Dragon Divine Gang experts could only suppress their fear and continued waiting there. However, their wait did not last long as a figure slowly rose upward in Dragon City. That figure's appearance immediately caught those Dragon Divine Gang experts' attention. "It's Suhan. He has finally appeared. Let's see if he can chase away the Purple Beast Alliance." The Dragon Divine Gang experts looked on in anticipation. At the bottom of their hearts, they preferred surrendering to Suhan as the Purple Beast Alliance had previously killed their gang leader, making them resistant to the Alliance, as their previous gang leader had always treated them well. Jian Wushuang had already appeared in the void, and before those Purple Beast Alliance experts. The Purple Beast Alliance experts also looked towards him, but none paid him much attention as they noticed the divine power spreading from Jian Wushuang's body was only at the high-level Heaven Ultimate God, while their alliance had several high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods. "You're the Purple Beast Alliance Master." Jian Wushuang had an indifferent smile on his face as his sight directly landed on the Alliance Master sitting on the throne right in the middle of the crowd. The Alliance Master glanced at Jian Wushuang, but was too lazy to reply to him. The petite old man beside the Alliance Master shouted in a deep voice, "You aren't one of the high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods from the Dragon Divine Gang." "Who are you?" Jian Wushuang replied, "I'm Suhan. Unfortunately, I've set my eyes on the Dragon Divine Gang, hence the Purple Beast Alliance can only return to whence you came from." Jian Wushuang spoke as though nothing mattered. However, the petite old man immediately gave him a strict glance and said, "How dare you? Reckless idiot! Where did this idiotic young man come from?" The expressions of the Purple Beast Alliance experts turned cold. The Purple Beast Alliance Master calmly said, "Kill him." Chapter 2679, 1/kill. Kill him. Two figures took action at the same time upon the Purple Beast Alliance Master's order. Those two were the petite old man, while the other was an evil-looking woman in black clothes, the left and right guardian of the Purple Beast Alliance. They were both extremely strong high-level heaven ultimate gods. The void seems as though it had been pierced open as a black sword appeared beside Jian Wushuang and quietly pierced toward his heart. On the other hand, the petite old man with a golden hammer in each hand directly attacked Jian Wushuang. However, the black sword and golden hammers failed to touch Jian Wushuang's actual body, but traveled through his figure instead. Whoosh! It was unknown when but Jian Wushuang's body had appeared in a nearby void. He seems to have good speeds. The petite young man and the evil black-clothed woman immediately looked toward Jian Wushuang. "I'm not interested in mediocre people," Jian Wushuang mocked, but his eyes were fixated on the Purple Beast Alliance Master. The Purple Beast Alliance Master had extremely strong combat power among the peak heaven ultimate gods, and is especially good at attacking and killing, but his physical protection capabilities can only be considered normal, mumbled Jian Wushuang softly. He also obtained detailed information about the Purple Beast Alliance Master and his expert's true strength. He only dared to appear openly because he had all that information. The Dragon Divine Gang isn't weak, whilst this Purple Beast Alliance is slightly stronger. I can subdue both forces, but I'll have to show my absolute strength to make both forces' experts surrender willingly. I have to kill this Purple Beast Alliance Master neatly. Jian Wushuang had a cold look in his eyes, while the magnificent divine power on his body had already expanded, while a huge amount of golden divine power coagulated like crazy behind his back. The 3,000-meter-tall golden god shadow appeared behind Jian Wushuang in the blink of an eye. The golden god shadow was extremely majestic as it looked down at everything in heaven and earth. At the same time, the 7 stars secret technique in Jian Wushuang's body was also unleashed outward. The divine power on his body had immediately skyrocketed the moment he used the 7 stars secret technique. Those below Undying Saint could directly elevate their strength by an entire realm with the 7 stars secret technique scroll, too. Jian Wushuang was only a peak earth ultimate god, but his realm was directly raised to the primary level heaven ultimate god after displaying the 7 stars secret technique. The divine power he emitted was that of a peak heaven ultimate god stage under the black stone's disguise. His aura has strengthened. Peak heaven ultimate god. It's a peak heaven ultimate god's divine power. The expressions of many Purple Beast Alliance experts darkened. Even the Purple Beast Alliance Master, who initially did not pay much attention to Jian Wushuang, also looked at him with a peculiar expression. Jian Wushuang's combat power had been raised to an astonishing level after using both the 7 stars secret technique and divine god of punishment. These 2 secret techniques should be more than sufficient to kill this Purple Beast Alliance Master. Jian Wushuang secretly smiled. He then directly made his move. His figure had only slightly moved forward, but it ended up with him directly crossing the lengthy distance and appearing in front of the crowd. The speed he burst out in that instant staggered the crowd. This speed, the Purple Beast Alliance Master was also startled. Bang! The Purple Beast Alliance Master banged on his throne's armrest as his divine power was immediately unleashed. His figure was like a primitive beast as he attacked Jian Wushuang. So what if you're fast? The battle between experts has never relied on speed, said the Purple Beast Alliance Master coldly as a domineering axe appeared in his hand. The axe could be identified as a high-level heavenly treasure, as it looked extremely powerful. As the Alliance Master was about to wave the axe in his hand, Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently before him as he slowly stretched out his palm and pointed at the area Purple Beast Alliance Master was located. A finger-pointing heavenly technique. As simple finger-pointing had evoked the space-time energy around that area. the Alliance Master's figure paused in the middle of the air without any warning, although his body paused. His face still had that hideous expression, along with his one hand raised while still maintaining the action of waving his axe. However, the space-time he was in had already completely paused. A finger-pointing heavenly technique, the divine technique Jian Wushuang comprehended for 9 years before he barely grasped it. Although he had only barely grasped the technique, and his strength was too low, fully displaying that skill with his perception of the space-time law at that moment was not something a usual peak heaven ultimate god could pull off. He could make the space-time an ordinary peak heaven ultimate god was to fall into an extremely short stasis. The period was extremely short. It was just a moment that was even shorter than the blink of an eye. However, this short moment was enough to decide lots of matters in a fight between experts. It could be seen that Jian Wushuang's figure was unaffected at all and had already appeared in front of the Purple Beast Alliance Master. The latter remained in his axe-waving position, but without the axe landing the entire time. The space-time where the Alliance Master was in only returned to normal when Jian Wushuang had waved his longsword. The Blood Mountain sword had attacked toward the Alliance Master like a poisonous snake, and was only half a centimeter away from the Alliance Master's head. The Purple Beast Alliance Master could not react in time despite space-time around him having already recovered. Slurp! The cold sword flitted through mercilessly, and the Alliance Master's head had flown outward as his life had started to fade away. The Purple Beast Alliance Master still had that frightened expression on his face just before he died. How can he be so fast? The corners of his mouth were still mumbling softly. He was in a situation where both space-time and his consciousness was stagnant. He had no idea about what happened during the time his consciousness was stagnant. Therefore, he still thought that Jian Wushuang killed him with incredible speed. He had no idea Jian Wushuang had used divine techniques. Although Jian Wushuang was fast, it was not so exaggerated. My divine power and space-time law perspective are sufficient to fight with an ordinary peak heaven ultimate god. In the strongest among the experts of the peak heaven ultimate god stage, once I display the 7 stars secret technique and divine god of punishment, it's very easy to kill an ordinary peak heaven ultimate god with this almost godlike finger-pointing heavenly technique. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. The Purple Beast Alliance experts surrounding them looked extremely stunned. In their impression, their Alliance Master was extremely strong, since the previous peak Heaven Ultimate God Dragon Divine Gang leader was directly killed by their Alliance Master. However, their powerful Alliance Master died in someone else's hands at that moment. In addition, it happened so fast.